When he says it, he means it, and you don't get to bend it and twist it to what you want. To reach the lost Israelites, the message has to go to everybody, and then the whomsoever wills will come. The ones who he draws will come. By the way, knowledge meaning what? Having a relationship with the truth. Oh, you learned, and you got tons of information, but have you come into a relationship with truth?
Boker Tov, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to day 3 of 5 of our journey through Deuteronomy. Yes, it's me again. I just want to tell a very quick story. You might be wondering, okay, who is this guy and why is he up here? So after a Torah study about 6 to 8 months ago, Rabbi Steve, we were doing a council call and he asked, would you be interested in doing this? And I said, yeah, sure. And so then from May into September, right at the end, I had the opportunity to lead a couple Torah studies, and then this is just a natural segue to allow him to, focus on the things that he needs to do, would sleep. And then also just another thing for those who hadn't been to a Torah study, and just an encouragement. Way before that, actually, the first time we Skyped, which was August 2017, he was giving an example, and he said, "Were you on this past week's Torah study?" And I said, "No," and he said, "Shame on you." And I use this as an example because I could have easily said, oh, all right, who is this guy? I hadn't been to one. There was no obligation. And I said, no, you're probably right. I need to be there. And then my wife and I made a commitment, starting with Sukkot from last year, to attend as many Torah studies as possible. Of course, things come up and they're archived and recorded, so you can always go back and listen. But just using, as we've been learning about submission and the great examples of Mr. Nate Taylor here and others in terms of something that wasn't sitting at first and then using it as a growing opportunity, just to realize that if without those words of shame on you and now having the opportunity to lead it, it's really been a great blessed experience. So just an encouragement, Torah study Tuesday night is fantastic, and we're going to have the opportunity this Sunday to actually start it off together with Barry Sheets. So yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, so we're going to start in chapter 15 today. Our first reader is Dawid. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. May he bless Dawid, who has come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family, and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Amen. So you're going to start us with 15, verses 1 through 10.
At the end of every 7 years, you make a release of debts. And this is the word of the release. Every creditor is to release what he has loaned to his neighbor. He does not require it of his neighbor or his brother, because it is called the release of Adonai. Of a foreigner you could require it, but your hand is to release whatever is owed by your brother. Only there should be no poor among you. For Adonai does greatly bless you in the land which Adonai Elohecha is giving you to possess as an inheritance. Only if you diligently obey the voice of Adonai Elohecha to guard to do all these commands which I am commanding you today, for Adonai Elohecha shall bless you as he promised you, and you shall lend to many nations, but you shall not borrow. You shall rule over many nations, but they do not rule over you. When there is a poor man with you, one of your brothers, within any of the gates in your land, which Adonai Elohecha is giving you, do not harden your heart, nor shut your hand from your poor brother. For you shall certainly open your hand to him, and certainly lend him enough for his need, whatever he needs. Be on guard, lest there be a thought of Belial in your heart, saying, the 7th year, the year of release, is near. And your eye is evil against your poor brother, and you give him nothing. And he shall cry out to Adonai against you, and it shall be a sin in you. You shall certainly give to him, and your heart should not be grieved when you give to him, because for this reason Adonai Elohecha does bless you in all your works, and in all to which you put your hand.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Dawid. And just for everyone who might be joining us on the live stream, this is day 3 of 5, and anyone in person, of the Deuteronomy reading. So we'll go through, and then we will have Rabbi Steve lead the Midrash, where we focus on the chapters we covered today and how we can apply it to our walk. So if you're on the live stream, we're going to read, and then you're welcome to put in questions, and either Kurt or Robert will be able to handle that. Next up, we have Ali. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Ali, who has come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family, and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Amen. So you'll finish off chapter 15, verses 11 to 23.
Thank you. Okay. 15, 11. All right. Because the poor one does... Wait, 15:11? Okay, all right. Because the poor one does not cease from the land. Therefore I am commanding you, saying, you shall certainly open your hand to your brother, to your poor, and to your needy one in your land. When your brother is sold to you, a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman, and shall serve you 6 years, then let him go free from you in the 7th year. And when you send him away free from you, let him not go away empty-handed. You shall richly supply him from your flock and from your threshing floor and from your winepress with that which Yahweh has blessed you with to give him. And you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Mitzrayim, and Yahweh your Elohim ransomed you. Therefore I am commanding you this word today. And it shall be when he says to you, I do not go away from you, because he loves you and your house, because it is good for him with you. Then you shall take an awl and thrust it through his ear to the door, and he shall be and he shall be your servant forever. Do the same to your female servant. Let it not be hard in your eyes when you send him away free from you, for he has been worth a double hard servant in serving you 6 years. And Yahweh your Elohim shall bless you in all that you do. Set apart to Yahweh your Elohim all the firstborn males that come from your herd and your flock. Do no work with the firstborn of your herd, nor shear the firstborn of your flock. You and your household are to eat it before Yahweh your Elohim, year by year, in the place which Yahweh chooses. But when there is any defect in it, lame or blind, or has any evil defect, do not slaughter it to Yahweh your Elohim. Eat it within your gates, the unclean and the clean alike, as the gazelle and as the deer. Only do not eat its blood. Pour it on the ground like water.
Amen, amen. Thank you, Ali. Next up we have Dennis. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Dennis, who's come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Amen. So you're going to start in chapter 16. Do you want to use your own or this one? Okay. 1 to 17. There you go.
Thank you. Guard the new moon of Abib and perform the Pesach to Yahweh your Elohim. For in the new moon of Abib, Yahweh your Elohim brought you out of Mitzrayim by night. And you shall slaughter the Pesach to Yahweh your Elohim from the flock and the herd in the place where Yahweh chooses to put his name. Eat no leavened bread with it. For 7 days you eat unleavened bread with it, bread of affliction, because you came out of the land of Mitzrayim in haste, so that you remember the day in which you came out of the land of Mitzrayim, all the days of your life. And no leaven shall be seen with you in all your border for 7 days. Neither should any of the meat which you slaughter in the evening on the first day stay all night until morning. You are not allowed to slaughter the Pesach within any of your gates, which Yahweh your Elohim gives you, but at the place where Yahweh your Elohim chooses to make his name dwell, there you slaughter the Pesach in the evening. At the going down of the sun, at the appointed time you came out of Mitzrayim. And you shall roast and eat it in the place which Yahweh your Elohim chooses. And in the morning you shall turn and go to your tents. 6 days you eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day there is a closing festival to Yahweh your Elohim. You do no work. Count 7 weeks for yourself. Begin to count 7 weeks from the time you begin to put the sickle to the grain. And you shall perform the festival of Shavuot to Yahweh your Elohim according to the voluntary offering from your hand, which you give as Yahweh your Elohim blesses you. And you shall rejoice before Yahweh your Elohim, you and your son and your daughter and your male servant and your female servant, and the Levite who is within your gates, and the stranger and the fatherless and the widow who are in your midst, at the place where Yahweh your Elohim chooses to make his name dwell. And you shall remember that you were a slave in Mitzrayim, and you shall guard and do these laws. Perform the festival of Sukkot for 7 days after the ingathering from your threshing floor and from your winepress. And you shall rejoice in the festival, you and your son and your daughter, and your male servant and your female servant, and the Levite, and the stranger and the fatherless, and the widow who are within your gates. For 7 days you shall celebrate to Yahweh your Elohim in the place which Yahweh chooses, because Yahweh your Elohim does bless you in all your increase and in all the work of your hands, and you shall be only rejoicing. 3 times a year all your males appear before Yahweh your Elohim in the place which he chooses at the festival of Matzot, and at the festival of Shavuot, and at the festival of Sukkot. And none should appear before Yahweh empty-handed, but each one with the gift of his hand, according to the blessing of Yahweh your Elohim, which he has given you.
Amen. Amen. We shall only be rejoicing in Sukkot. Awesome. So just let you know, I know for readers, I know Janet and then Donna and Josh, you're interested. So yesterday, Rabbi Tom had asked me to read today, and so we can have you for tomorrow. I know, Janet, you would be the 10th reader, and then Rabbi Tom the 11th, and then Josh and Donna just remind me tomorrow, but I have you bookmarked that you'll be up here. I know Gwen Waffle had asked me as well. Sound good? Next up, we have Amy. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Amy, who has come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set-apart one bless her and her family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of her hands. Amen. Amen. So you're going to take us from verse 18 in chapter 16 all the way to verse 10 of chapter 17.
Appoint judges and officers within all your gates, which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you according to your tribes. And they shall judge the people with righteous right ruling. Do not distort right ruling. Do not show partiality, nor take a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and twists the words of the righteous. Follow righteousness, righteousness alone, so that you live and inherit the land which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you. Do not plant for yourself any trees as an Asherah near the slaughter place of Yahweh your Elohim that you make for yourself. And do not set up a pillar which Yahweh your Elohim hates. Do not slaughter to Yahweh your Elohim a bull or sheep which has any blemish, any evil matter, for that is an abomination to Yahweh your Elohim. When there is found in your midst, in any of your cities, which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you, a man or a woman who does what is evil in the eyes of Yahweh your Elohim, in transgressing his covenant, and has gone down and served other mighty ones, and bowed down to them, or to the sun, or to the moon, or to any of the host of the heavens, which I have not commanded, and it has been made known to you, and you have heard, and have searched diligently, then see, if true, the matter is confirmed, that such an abomination has been done in Israel. Then you shall bring out to your gates that man or woman who has done evil, this evil matter, and you shall stone to death that man or woman with stones. At the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses shall he that is to die be put to death. He is not put to death by the mouth of 1 witness. The hand of the witness shall be first against him to put him to death, and the hand of all the people last. So shall you purge the evil from your midst. When any matter arises which is too hard for you to judge, between blood and blood, between plea and plea, or between stroke and stroke, matters of strife within your gates, then you shall rise and go up to the place which Yahweh your Elohim chooses, and shall come to the priests, the Levites, and to the judge who is in those days, and shall inquire. And they shall declare to you the word of right ruling, and you shall do according to the word which they declare to you from that place which Yahweh chooses, and you shall guard to do according to all that they instruct you.
Thank you. Amen. Thank you, Amy. Next up, we have Josh. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Josh, who has come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family, and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Amen. So verses 11 through 20, and finish off chapter 17.
Do according to the Torah in which they teach you, according to the right ruling which they say to you. You do not turn to the right or to the left from the word which they declare to you. And the man who acts arrogantly, so as not to listen to the priest who stands to serve there before Yahweh your Elohim, or to the judge, that man shall die. So you shall purge the evil from Israel. And let all the people hear and fear, and no longer do arrogantly. When you come to the land which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you, and shall possess it, and shall dwell in it, and you shall say, let me set a sovereign over me like all the nations that are around me. You shall certainly set a sovereign over you, whom Yahweh your Elohim shall choose. Set a sovereign over you from among your brothers. You are not allowed to set a foreigner over you, who is not your brother. Only he is not to increase horses for himself, nor cause the people to return to Mitzrayim to increase horses. For Yahweh has said to you, do not return that way again. And he is not to increase wives for himself, lest his heart turn away, nor is he to greatly increase silver and gold for himself. And it shall be, when he sits on the throne of his reign, that he shall write for himself a copy of this Torah in a book from the one before the priests, the Levites. And it shall be with him, and he shall read it all the days of his life, so that he learns to fear Yahweh his Elohim and guard all the words of his Torah and these laws to do them, so that his heart is not lifted up above his brothers, and so as not to turn aside from the command, right or left, so that he prolongs his days in his reign, he and his children in the midst of Israel.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Amy and Josh. Deuteronomy 17, Rabbi was just mentioning that yesterday. Very, very important chapter when it comes to leadership and structure. So next up we have Carrie. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Carrie, who has come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set-apart one bless her and her family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of her hands. Amen. Amen. So you're going to start us off in chapter 18, verses 1 through 16.
The priests, the Levites, all the tribe of Levi have no part nor inheritance with Israel. They are to eat the offerings of Yahweh made by fire in his inheritance. But among his brothers, Levi has no inheritance. Yahweh is his inheritance, as he has spoken to him. And this is the priest's right from the people, from those who slaughter a slaughtering, whether it is a bull or sheep. They shall give to the priest the shoulder and the 2 cheeks and the stomach, the first fruits of your grain and your new wine and your oil, and the first of the fleece of your sheep you give to him. For Yahweh your Elohim has chosen him out of all your tribes to stand to serve in the name of Yahweh, him and his sons forever. And when the Levite comes from one of your gates, from where he has sojourned among all Yisrael, shall come with all the desire of his being to the place which Yahweh chooses, then he shall serve in the name of Yahweh, his Elohim, like all his brothers, the Levites, who are standing there before Yahweh. They are to have a portion for portion to eat, besides what comes from the sale of his inheritance. When you come into the land which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you, do not learn to do according to the abominations of those nations. Let no one be found among you who makes his son or daughter pass through the fire, or one who practices divination, or a user of magic, or one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or one who conjures spells, or a medium, or a spiritist, or one who calls up the dead. For whoever does these is an abomination to Yahweh, and because of these abominations, Yahweh your Elohim drives them out from before you. Be perfect before Yahweh your Elohim, for these nations whom you are possessing do listen to those using magic, to diviners. But as for you, Yahweh your Elohim has not appointed such for you. Yahweh your Elohim shall raise up for you a prophet, like me from your midst, from your brothers. Listen to him, according to all you asked of Yahweh your Elohim in Horeb, in the day of the assembly, saying, Let me not hear again the voice of Yahweh my Elohim, nor let me see this great fire any more, lest I die.
Amen, amen. Thank you, Carrie. Next up, we have Nate. Yeah, put it there. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Nate, who has come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family, and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Amen. So go from chapter 18, verse 17, to chapter 19, verse 14.
And Yahweh said to me, What they have spoken is good. I shall raise up for them a prophet like you out of the midst of their brothers. And I shall put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. And it shall be, the man who does not listen to my words, which he speaks in my name, I require it of him. But the prophet who presumes to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded him to speak, or who speaks in the name of other mighty ones, even that prophet shall die. And when you say in your heart, How do we know the word which Yahweh has not spoken? When the prophet speaks in the name of Yahweh and the word is not, or comes not, that is the word which Yahweh has not spoken. The prophet has spoken it presumptuously. Do not be afraid of them, of him. When Yahweh your Elohim cuts off the nations whose land Yahweh your Elohim is giving you, and you dispossess them and dwell in their cities and in their houses, separate 3 cities for yourself in the midst of your land, which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you to possess. Prepare a way for yourself and divide into 3 parts the border of your land, which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you to inherit, that any manslayer shall flee there. And this matter of the manslayer who flees there and lives, he who strikes his neighbor unknowingly, not having hated him in time past, even he who goes to the forest with his neighbor to cut timber, and his hand swings a stroke with an axe to cut down the tree, and the head slips from the handle and strikes his neighbor so that he dies, let him flee to one of these cities and live. Lest the revenger of blood, while his displeasure is hot, pursue the manslayer and overtake him, because the way is long and shall strike his being, though he was not worthy of death, since he had not hated him before. Therefore I am commanding you, saying, Separate three cities for yourself. And if Yahweh your Elohim enlarges your border, as he swore to your fathers and has given you the land which he promised to give to your fathers, when you guard all this command to do it, which I am commanding you today, to love Yahweh your Elohim and to walk in his way, all his ways, all the days, then you shall add 3 more cities for yourself besides these 3. So that innocent blood is not shed in the midst of your land, which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you as an inheritance, or blood guilt shall be upon you. But when anyone hates his neighbor, and shall lie in wait for him, and rise against him, and strike his being so that he dies, then he shall flee to one of these cities. And the elders of his city shall send and bring him from there, and give him into the hand of the revenger of blood, and he shall die. Your eye shall not pardon him, but you shall purge the blood of the innocent from Yisrael, so that it might be well with you. Do not remove your neighbor's boundary, which those in the past have set, in your inheritance, which you inherit in the land of that Yahweh your Elohim is giving you to possess.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Nate. Next up we have Yvonne. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Yvonne, who has come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set-apart one bless her and her family, and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of her hands. Amen. Amen. So we're going to go from chapter 19, verse 15, to chapter 20, verse 7.
One witness does not rise up against a man concerning any crookedness or any sin that he commits. At the mouth of 2 witnesses, or at the mouth of 3 witnesses, a matter is established. When a malicious witness rises up against any man to accuse him of turning aside, then both men who have the dispute shall stand up before Yahweh, before the priests and the judges who serve in those days. And the judges shall diligently search and see if the witness is a false witness, who has falsely accused his brother. Then they shall do to him as he thought to have done to his brother. Thus you shall purge the evil from your midst. And let the rest hear and fear, and never again do this evil matter in your midst. And let your eye not pardon, life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. When you go out to battle against your enemies and shall see horses and chariots and people more numerous than you, do not be afraid of them, for Yahweh your Elohim, who has brought you up from the land of Mitzrayim, is with you. And it shall be, when you draw near to the battle, that the priest shall come and speak to the people, and shall say to them, Hear, O Israel, you are drawing near today to battle with your enemies. Do not let your heart faint, do not fear or tremble, or be afraid before them. For Yahweh your Elohim is he who goes with you, to fight for you against your enemies, to save you. And the officers shall speak to the people, saying, Who is the man who has built a new house and has not dedicated it? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in the battle, and another man dedicate it. And who is the man who has planted a vineyard and has not begun to use it? Let him also go and return to his house, lest he die in the battle, and another man shall begin to use it. And who is the man who is engaged to a woman and has not taken her? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in the battle, and another man take her.
Yeah, absolutely. Amen. Amen. Thank you, Yvonne. And you'll use that one? Yeah. Next up, we have Candace. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. May he bless Candace, who has come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set-apart one bless her and her family, and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of her hands. Amen. Amen. So we're going to go from verse 8 to 20. So you'll just finish chapter 20. Yeah, starting in verse 8.
And the officers shall speak further to the people and say, Who is the man who is afraid and tender of heart? Let him go and return to his house, lest the heart of his brothers faint like his heart. And it shall be when the officers have finished speaking to the people that they shall appoint commanders of the divisions to lead the people. When you draw near to a city to fight against it, then you shall make a call for peace to it. And it shall be that if it accepts your call for peace and shall open to you, then all the people found in it are to be your compulsory labor and serve you. But if it does not make peace with you and shall fight against you, then you shall besiege it. And Yahweh your Elohim shall give it into your hands, and you shall smite every male in it with the edge of the sword. Only the women and the little ones and the livestock and all that is in the city, all its spoil, you shall take as plunder for yourself. And you shall eat the enemy's plunder which Yahweh your Elohim gives you. Do so to all the cities which are very far from you, which are not of the cities of these nations, only of the cities of these people which Yahweh your Elohim gives you as an inheritance. You do not keep alive any that breathe, but you shall certainly put them under the ban, the Hittite and the Amorite and the Canaanite and the Perizzite and the Hivite and the Jebusite, as Yahweh your Elohim has commanded you, lest they teach you to do according to all their abominations which they have done for their mighty ones, and you sin against Yahweh your Elohim. When you besiege a city for a long time by fighting against it to take it, you do not destroy its trees by wielding an axe against them. If you do not eat of them, do not cut them down, for is the tree of the field a man to be besieged by you? Only the trees which you know are not trees for food you do destroy and cut down to build siege works against the city that is fighting against you until it fails.
Amen. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Candace. There you go. Thank you, Ali. And thank you again, Candace. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Second to last reader will be Janet, and then we'll run the mic back to Rav Tom. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Janet, who has come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless her and her family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of her hands. Amen. Amen. So we'll go from verses 1 to 9 in chapter 21.
When anyone is found slain, lying in the field, in the land which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you to possess, and it is not known who struck him, then your elders and your judges shall go out, and they shall measure the distance from the slain man to the cities round about. And it shall be that the elders of the city nearest to the slain man shall take a heifer which has not been worked and which has not pulled with a yoke. And the elders of that city shall bring the heifer down to a wadi with flowing water, which is neither plowed nor sown, and they shall break the heifer's neck there in the wadi. And the priests, the sons of Levi, shall come near, for Yahweh your Elohim has chosen them to serve him and to bless in the name of Yahweh, and by their mouth every strife and every yoke is tried. And let all the elders of that city nearest to the slain man wash their hands over the heifer, whose neck was broken in the wadi. And they shall answer and say, our hands have not shed this blood, nor have our eyes seen it. O Yahweh, forgive your people Israel, whom you have ransomed, and do not allow innocent blood in the midst of your people Israel. And the blood guilt shall be pardoned to them. Thus you purge the guilt of innocent blood from your midst, when you do what is right in the eyes of Yahweh.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Janet. And our last reader for today, day 3 of 5, the Deuteronomy, will be Rabbi Tom in the back. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. May he bless Rabbi Tom, who has come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Amen. So we will finish chapter 21, Rabbi Tom, verses 10 to 23.
When you go out to fight against your enemies, and Yahweh your Elohim shall give them into your hand, and you shall take them captive, and shall see among the captives a woman fair of form, and shall delight in her, and take her for your wife. Then you shall bring her home to your house, and she shall shave her head and trim her nails, and put aside the mantle of her captivity, and shall dwell in your house, and mourn her father and her mother a month of days. And after that you shall go into her and be her husband, and she shall be your wife. And it shall be, if you are not pleased with her, then you shall let her go at her desire. But you do not sell her at all for silver. Do not treat her harshly, since you have humbled her. When a man has two wives, one loved and the other unloved, and they have borne him children, both the loved and the unloved, and the firstborn son is of her who is unloved, then it shall be on the day he makes his sons to inherit his possessions. He is not allowed to treat the son of the beloved wife as firstborn in the face of the son of the unloved, who is truly the firstborn. But he is to acknowledge the son of the unloved wife as the firstborn by giving him a double portion of all that he has, for he is the beginning of his strength. The right of the firstborn is his. When a man has a wayward and rebellious son who is not listening to the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and who, when they have disciplined him, does not listen to them, then his father and his mother shall take hold of him and bring him out to the elders of his city, to the gate of his city, and shall say to the elders of his city, "This son of ours is wayward and rebellious. He's not listening to our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard." Then all the men of the city shall stone him to death with stones. Thus you shall purge the evil from your midst, and let all Israel hear and fear. And when a man has committed a sin worthy of death, then he shall be put to death, and you shall hang him on a tree. Let his body not remain overnight on the tree, for you shall certainly bury him the same day. For he who is hanged is accursed of Elohim, so that you do not defile the land which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you as an inheritance.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Rabbi Tom, and thank you to all the readers today. Again, reading before brothers and sisters. And we know Rabbi Steve teaches in the Heart of the Matter series that we know that the Word is Yeshua himself. And so when we sit down, are we having that quality experience with the Word? And I can say, I think together we are definitely having a quality experience in this room. So for readers, let you know, we have 2 more days left, day 4 tomorrow and day 5 on Sunday. As Monday morning, we will be having the YMTOI presentations during this time slot. So just to kind of program ahead of time, we have 13 readers tomorrow with 3 already spoken for. That was Gwen, Josh, and Donna. And then on Sunday, 11. So if you want to read, you have 2 more opportunities to do so. And we will now recite the traditional closing blessing. Baruch atah Yahweh Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam, nata b'tochenu, Baruch atah Yahweh, noten haTorah. Amen. Blessed are you, Yahweh Elohim, King of the universe, who has given us a Torah of truth and has planted eternal life in our midst. Blessed are you, Yahweh Elohim, giver of the Torah. Amen. Amen. Okay, and then we will continue in the Midrash portion, as we know, focusing, starting with chapter 15 and going forward. Rabbi Steve should and hopefully be here momentarily. Because I was just thinking when I was sitting over there, you go to a concert and you see an opening, or you see an opening band and then the real band. Well, I'm just the opening band, and you guys came here for the real band. So, got to give credit where credit is due. And so, in the meantime, again, just go back through starting with chapter 15. We can always just start, as I do have some notes from the Torah portions. It's anything I would say is only going to be from what Rabbi Steve teaches, because that is part of the discipleship process. So, we can start and then just keep going. That way, we're not just sitting here with empty time for us and on the live stream. So Doed has a mic, and we can continue, and I will get my notes out, and I will not be hesitant to say, I don't know, let's wait for Rabbi if there's something that I don't have a note or isn't obvious from one of his teachings. How's that sound? Is that good? Okay. Sorry.
You're a pretty good opening act. In verse 17, then you shall take an awl and thrust it through his ear to the door, and he shall be your servant forever. Do the same for your female servant. I was thinking back to in Christianity, I kind of had an idea with this verse that that it represents you're a slave to whatever you proclaim. And I kind of had I don't know if it was a strange thought about earrings back in those days, that they might possibly be similar to that. So I guess maybe that was an errant thought, or maybe it was accurate in some sense. So I was just wondering maybe what your take might be on that. And the other thing was forward when they talked about going into battle. It just makes me think of Braveheart, a scene from Braveheart.
Well, thank you for the very easy fastball for the first question. I have no idea, so I'm not going to say anything on that one. But yeah, for the scene from Braveheart, I know one of the guys in the Marco Polo yesterday was talking about the book of Joshua and saying that it would be a really great movie. And I think it would. I mean, you just read that or even read this, and just to see it on that scale would be pretty epic. But knowing Hollywood, they'd probably mess it up anyways. So, next, Mike. But I will, Greg, I will note that question, so then Rabbi comes, I will pass it along to him, and I think I see him in a purple shirt.
What I'm seeing in the reading of the scriptures today is how Yahweh wants us to treat our brothers, sisters, how merciful he wants us to be because he's merciful, that he says he doesn't want any of us to be poor, there should be no poor among you. And so that you should, out of the goodness of your heart, help your brother to succeed as well. And I also seen how merciful, he is towards when they would go to battle, and a man would want one of the nation's women, and how merciful that Yahweh would allow her to mourn for the loss of her loved ones, and that he would not allow the man to just take her, but to allow her to be comforted and loved. And so I also see in here how Yahweh expects us to come before him with the feast, and that we should celebrate these things because these are all about him. And so I see a lot of mercy that Yahweh shows, but also he's our example of how we're supposed to be towards our brothers and sisters.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Candace. Yeah, very well said. The first part in terms of the aspect of how we treat each other, I know Rabbi teaches all the time in terms of we're meant to be, conduits of giving. And the note I have here is that, we're giving blessings to give, not to acquire more stuff, because he, in that mercy, continues to give to us that we are then to give to others. And especially in this here in chapter 15, in verse 9, where it says, "Be on guard lest there be a thought of Belial in your heart," that evil eye, which is related to generosity, turning towards our brothers. And I know in some of the teachings, Rabbi Steve connects that verse to both Proverbs 4 and Mark chapter 7 out of the overflow of the heart, as well as the wicked thoughts in our heart. And often those wicked thoughts connected to here are those thoughts of greed or stinginess, and that begins in the body, as we learned last night from Curtis, that we have to be very aware of what's going on in. So I think, that's just a wonderful connection that Rabbi makes of the thought in our heart is that sense of stinginess, whereas we're instructed to just keep on giving. And when we give, just like when Yeshua blesses the 2 loaves and the 5 fish, that's all they had. And so when we are appreciative of what we have, then Yahweh opens up the floodgates to more.
Steve Waffle.
Steve Waffle.
Okay. Rabbi likes us to find how, or what's in the Torah portion, how we can apply it to our life today, and I'm going to kind of step off of what the lady before me said, and it's in 15:4. There should be no poor among you, for Yahweh does greatly bless you in the land which your Elohim has given you to possess an inheritance, only if you diligently obey the voice of Yahweh your Elohim, to guard and to do all your commands. So for me, that says he looks to bless you and doesn't look to have you poor. And yes, that you should help your brother, but you have an obligation to do something instead of just have your hand out. So that's what I get.
Yeah, very well said. That's part of, as we're going through, are you covenanted? We have these obligations. And there's 3 hands in the back, all in one cluster. Okay, yeah, just pointing it out. Yeah, that we're understanding that we have these obligations of performance, and that's part of it. And you know, as Rabbi shows all the time, and he usually does one of these when he does it, is that all of the good stuff is always followed by that 2-letter word, if. And it starts with that in Exodus 19, and we know just from time and time again, I mean, how much more do we have to see that that's the relationship that we have, and that mercy. And Candace, something you also said brought to mind, and then confirmed by Mr. Steve Waffle, that we were reading, I think yesterday, about what we can or cannot eat. And, you know, do not put this in your mouth. And it just made me think of a parent teaching a child, like, no, get that out of your mouth. No, you don't eat that. That's a Lego, or that's a stick, right? And that's how he is with us, that patience, that we don't know better. And so he's telling you literally, don't put that in your mouth. And I think that relates to everything else that, you know, has been said today, is that mercy and that patience. But at the same time, when we do know enough, we have to have that obligation. And I thank Mr. Waffle for bringing that up so that we all could benefit. You know, as Rabbi teaches, this is a collective act. So it says there, you know, it's not that you should be not poor, but no poor among you as a nation. So yeah, we're a body. And, you know, right now, as Rabbi teaches, we look like a bag of kneecaps and toes. So.
Yes, thank you. I was trying to find the verse, but I'll just paraphrase. When it says that at the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, a matter shall be established, I was just connecting it to my family. We have 3 children. So oftentimes for parents here, maybe they have that situation when one of them comes and says something that the other one did to them. And so I guess my question was, how do you apply that principle within a family situation? That will be one part, the first part of my question. And then the second part had to do with chapter 21, which is similar. It's verse 18, when it says, when a man has a wayward and rebellious son who is not listening to the voice of his mother or father, and so they're supposed to, and they have disciplined them, and they're supposed to bring them to the elders, and it talks about finally stoning them. Of course, I don't want my kids to die, but how do you apply that part to currently, practically to a situation in our family about discipline and all that stuff? Thank you.
It's 423-825-4975. That's the number for MTOI. But seriously, so the witnesses, I think that's a great example. And we looked before about, I think in Deuteronomy, where we have to search out if the matter is true or not before we bring it to each other. And I think in Proverbs it talks about how that aspect of if we haven't done that process of searching it out, well, then that's on us. We've got a hand over there. So that's an aspect in terms of the family of the witnesses. And I think, again, like I said, and I was joking, but seriously talk to either Shamash Robert or Rabbi Steve about how that would apply individually. In terms of the question of 21, and this is all, extremely important aspect, whether that's in the body, in the family, because as we're learning, throughout this entire week, especially there's a focus on, lashon hara, the evil speak, and the accusations and the slander and the sniop, as Rabbi says, the susceptible, the negative influence of other people, that when one thing happens and we don't search it out and we go to what they're saying. And it's like anything, any news story, and news is just what people are saying about a certain incident. So the same thing happens in the body. If it doesn't have those witnesses, and I don't have children, so I don't know to that degree, but the same thing even in a workplace, or something that I have more of that personal experience with, it's really easy for things to pop up, and if it's only coming from one person. But in terms of the individual, like Curtis taught last night, there is no silver bullet for any situation. I point you to the direction of my more qualified teachers. And then for verse 18, I know here, and Rabbi has taught on this, that first of all, this is not a young child. This is someone who knows better and is actively being rebellious. And then as we're learning even from, Leviticus 26, that if we don't listen, then we'll be punished more, and if we don't, then Yahweh will open up his own wrath himself, and it just continues to amp it up. Well, here we have it in 18, it says he's not listening, and then when they have disciplined him, they does not listen even more. So there's that element of it's not just a child who does not know better and is just acting, and like us when we first come into the walk, but this is somebody who is actively doing that, just like the famous Mr. Sticks, who was picking it up. He wasn't just going out and gathering some sticks for his stick collection. He was actively doing something defiantly, and that's why he had the result he did. So I think it's key here, because I know, for example, when my wife started looking into this, and she was talking to somebody at that time who was sharing similar information, the immediate thing was, what, you're going to stone your kids now? And I don't know if any of you have heard that, but it just seems like one of those extremes that they take out of it. And this is not a 5-year-old child in any way. And I know Rabbi has illuminated on that. I can't pull up which teaching that is right now, but it's somewhere in YouTube. Yeah. Sorry. But I hope that kind of generally helps answer the questions. Who's up?
Dawn in the back. I had a quick question. In 15, where we talked about there'll be no poor among you, but in other scripture it says there will always be poor among you. But what I heard today, a little bit different, is that, I guess this is a halakha question. How do we, or should we, be purchasing things from within the camp, so to speak, or within our body or within our community, Israel, before we purchase things outside? Example, there was a question that went around the Messianics in Facebook, I think it was, that if you had a choice to purchase something within the body from a friend or outside the body from somebody else, what would you do? And unfortunately, the majority of people would buy outside the body, so if there was anything wrong, they wouldn't have the conflict with a brother or a friend. But that doesn't seem to me to be the right answer according to Scripture now, because we're supposed to be supporting one another. So if there's somebody within the body that's selling the same product, we should be supporting that brother or sister. Is that what I'm kind of seeing? Would that be a correct interpretation of that?
Well, Rabbi's right outside the door, so. But I think it's a great point, but I think that's something because I know that there's been conversations about that, and as we start to develop and grow, there's going to be understandings of that business relationship. And for example, in the Jewish community, there's some Orthodox Jews who don't do any business other than inside. And so it would be interesting for Rabbi, as he comes down the aisle here, to explain and illuminate on doing business in the camp and whether or not we should purchase outside. So in the meantime, I'll tell a quick joke. So the joke is why are there Gentiles? Well, somebody has to pay retail price, so. What? Yeah. So Dawn's question was, actually, you can just ask it again.
Thank you, David. Boker Tov.
Boker Tov.
Excuse me. All right. Some of you were laughing because you thought I didn't like the question. It was turning around, but I actually just forgot my Bible and I had to go back and get it.
Before I forget, Greg's question was about the awl and relationship to earrings.
Greg wants earrings? He just said that Greg asked a question about earrings. I was like, why would he want earrings? Okay, no, I'm kidding. All right. Let's see if we can get this thing somewhat situated here. All right, that doesn't want to work. Okay. That'll have to do. All right, so I do apologize for being so late. I was up in counseling people till about 2:30 in the morning, and so I just appreciate that. David's able to come up here. I did watch a little bit of it on my phone as I was on my way. I noticed that the default answer was 423-825-4975. Now that's a true disciple. All right, hold on. Trying to see what chapters you were covering today. 15 through 21. Well, that's nothing in there. We're okay. We just move on. All right, so I do appreciate that over time we are developing the people that can do these kind of things. And actually, I almost wasn't going to come up because I really thought he was doing a great job. So I thought, you know. But then I heard 423-825-197. So I thought I probably should go in there. All right, so where are we on the questions? What was the question that we were up to that I needed to answer? Dawn, go ahead.
Yeah, chapter 15, Halakha question
Okay.
regarding there should be no poor among you, but later in Scripture says there'll always be poor among you. This kind of...
Why does that confuse you? It seems pretty clear right there. There should be none, there'll always be.
I guess my question is, I didn't see before where it kind of sounded like or alluded to that we should be doing business within our camp or with our brothers and sisters first, like if they're selling the same product versus going outside of the camp and purchasing the same thing, thus supporting those within the camp. There had been a Facebook question. If you had a choice to purchase something from a brother within the camp or outside the camp, what would you do? And the majority of Messianics would purchase outside. That way, if there was a problem
Well, they're
with the
all
product,
going straight to hell. I mean, it's just, you know.
Okay, that answers that question.
Next question. You see what happens when I get an extra hour and a half of sleep? No. Okay, let's talk about this thing. Okay, so when he says the phrase, and these are sometimes idiomatic phrases, the phrase, there should be no poor among you, it's an approach, it's a mindset we should have to do everything we can to make sure we're taking care of the poor. That's very important to him. But on the other hand, in the other section, he's saying, he's doing a different lesson. He's saying there will always be poor among you to teach you the lesson about how to take care of the poor. And so they're not contradictory terms. And so, but if you do buy from people and you could have bought from Messianics, well, then you are going straight to hell. So just don't worry about it. No, we don't believe all that stuff. I'm just teasing. But, we should be doing business, if possible, with our brothers. But you know what? Our brothers, just because they're brothers, and by the way, there's wheat and tares in that whole mess and system, just because they're our brothers doesn't mean they're actually better at their job or better vendors and have better products and better anything. And so, yes, you should give your brother a shot and let him have an opportunity. But you shouldn't think that you're owed anything just because you're part of the body. Does that make sense? Okay, so I don't have a problem with you in taking care of your needs and your family, finding the best available product, service, etc. But I do think if you are aware of someone inside the body, absolutely we should be going to them first. Absolutely, no doubt about it. But just sometimes you see these things that appear contradictory. There should not be. Well, there'll always be. What? Well, why do you think also he may say there'll always be? Because we're going to be not that great at there should not be. So that's another reason why there might always be. Because did you notice that there's certain themes throughout especially the Old Testament and also into the New, but especially in the Old Testament, about making sure to take care of the poor? And I think part of that's because that's us. And it's not always about financial, but I mean, we're poor in some area or other. And he says, don't forget that you were slaves in Egypt. And there's a reminder about that. So even if somehow you're no longer physically poor in terms of finances, you should be looking to take care of others as he took care of you. That goes back to our have you eaten and satisfied thing. It's in that section in Deuteronomy 8 that it reminds you that it's not your strength and your might that provided all that wealth. Because sometimes we can think, look what I did, look what I built, look what I made. Okay? And so that's really the thing that is about that mindset. Is hopefully that answers the question about the whole thing with the poor. So how focused are we about the poor? That third tithe, if you're not doing it, are you really caring about the poor? Because that whole third tithe's purpose is to take care of the poor. And we did talk about already that it's much more likely to be effective if you were to give it to the ministry to use in terms of getting it to the poor than doing it yourself. So that the poor, who really aren't necessarily poor, don't take advantage of you. We get phone calls from people that are basically ministry shopping. They'll call everybody to get something, and if they get enough of them to do it, they'll actually be not poor anymore. They get pretty good at being the local beggar, so to speak. And so this is kind of what we're talking about. All right, and there was another question about earrings. What was that? Over here, Greg, what were you asking? Were you asking if you can wear them? I don't know what you were asking. If you take the bezel with the MTOI coin, put a little post in that. We need a doorpost, though.
It is. I was just saying, in Christianity, I had an idea that in 1517, I believe, that with the pierce in the ear with an awl, like if I wanted to put holes in my ears, I would want to do it for a purpose, which as a slave to Yahweh, that would be the sense. Now, I had another idea that maybe people don't do it in that way. And would it be, in your opinion, that could possibly, they are a slave to something else?
I think that a lot of what's being addressed in Scripture does tend to be cultural at the time. And we have to be careful that we don't confuse halakha for all times with some things that were very situational and cultural. I mean, you do understand that in Exodus 21, right after the Ten Commandments, the very first thing that Yahweh tells them about is how to properly have slaves. Would that work today in culture? No. Do we really understand why he would have done that? No, but that was culturally necessary for that time. I mean, certainly he could have said, slavery, no good, stop. And it's not just that he's talking about Gentiles. He's saying when you have a Hebrew slave. So let's understand a lot of this is hard for us to understand with a 4,000-year disconnect. Time separates us from understanding some of these things. Okay, so hopefully that makes some sense. Also, I think all of us have enough holes in our head. I don't think we need to put any more. You're welcome. Okay. Mr. Nate.
Just piggybacking off what you were saying, Rabbi.
We don't piggyback. That's
unclean.
Right.
Sheep herding, off of what you said.
I'm just waking up. Give me a moment.
It'll get better.
Concerning the poor, there shall never be any poor among you, and then there'll always be. This is why we have leadership. And anybody who is against leadership, this is why it's still just building in my brain how important leadership is after the couple of years that we've been here. Rabbi's going to know, and Robert's going to know who the poor really are among us. So if we're giving our third tithe rather to the ministry rather than just trying to figure out who's who, they're going to know who is really needing and who is not. And also tied to that right after the poor was the slavery portion. Now, before I go into that, my ancestors were slaves that were brought over from England, and my father's side is from Mississippi. So what if we had brothers and sisters that were poor among us, and we were doing our third tithe like we're supposed to be doing, and the body of Israel is growing, and there are people who want to enter in or come or move, and we have families that have more than an abundance, and Rabbi says, oh, we've got a family that has a cabin. There's a 6 years of, maybe we could make some kind of a contract. You work for them for 6 years, get yourselves established. Maybe you can buy off your debt before then. But it's a contract basically between two people saying, I don't have the money to do what I got to do, but I would like to get established. Is there some way we can make an agreement? Which would be why we would have leadership to help us to get where we need to be.
Are you planning to head up that department?
I have thought about it for many years. That would be interesting. But, I mean, just think about the benefits. If we do it the way that Yahweh does it and tells us to do it, it could be a beautiful thing. The problem is mankind got involved in it and used it for terrible things.
Amen, absolutely. And look, you know, we may, leadership-wise, we may want to just give somebody some benevolence because they are disabled or have some other legitimate, because you got to remember, some poor is not legitimate. Legitimate meaning that person should and could have fixed that and needs to fix it. But they are legitimately poor at this moment, and so we can still help them, but we expect them to no longer be poor at some point. And some people will always be poor. I mean, they physically cannot do a whole lot to produce an income. And we take care and help those people as well. But one of the things is that if you are physically capable of things, we do expect, for example, if we have people come to the feast, and many of you are under this kind of a thing, we do expect not to have any issue looking for you to find you to volunteer to do something. Now, of course, that's not talking about the physically challenged. But some of you are just financially challenged, and that's all you're challenged. And so I wonder sometimes why I don't see you in the front of the line loading or unloading a truck if you're physically capable, or signing up to be with a class if you're physically capable. I remember a lady that came to our feasts, and she had a walker like Candace does. And you couldn't keep that lady trying to volunteer for something because she knew we were helping her. I mean, she wanted to be in the kitchen even. We had a kitchen at the time where we were cooking for everybody. I mean, even though it was hard for her to stand up, she said, I can go in the serving line and I can serve a little bit and then hold on to the table or the walker and I can use one hand. I mean, I told her, it's okay. You don't, no, I want to do something. So here's somebody very physically challenged arguing with me to do something, and I got people that are completely healthy doing nothing. And so that gets challenging, okay? Now, if you're doing the Beatitudes, it says that there is a need to be poor in spirit, but are we doing anything to help those that are poor in spirit to become filled with the right spirit? And so there's one way you can do that, again, is supporting the ministry, and the ministry gets the ability to counsel, to teach, to put out things that are available to help people to grow in the intrinsic nature of Yahweh, the Spirit. All kinds of things. See, but of course, we're all told and we're all beat into us, oh, but we don't know what they're doing with the money. How do you not notice what we're doing with the money? I mean, we're here, and we pay for a lot of this stuff. Did you not notice all the equipment that we're using to be able to do this, to broadcast to everybody? I mean, that's about $30,000 worth of cameras and equipment right there. Also that the people on the other side of the camera are getting the best possible interactive experience. Okay? How many of you have noticed, because a lot of you are usually on the other side of the camera, how much better it's gotten? Okay, look at all those hands go up, right? I mean, Marty and his team have just done a fantastic job of caring for and coming to me then and saying, we need something new. I'm like, why? Didn't we just buy? They're worse than a wife. They spend that money like crazy. My wife doesn't spend anywhere remotely close to what Marty wants me to spend. But I understand what he's trying to do. He's trying to say, how can we make this experience, for those of you that have not yet had a place locally to do this with, as beneficial, as virtual, as connected as possible. We don't want it to just be like you're sitting there watching a recording. Because you certainly could watch a recording of teachings and on a Sabbath, just pick up a teaching that's online and watch it. And so that's very important to us. It's also very important to us that we have the best equipment so that the people sitting here can also grab a microphone and be heard and be seen by those over there. And you guys connect. Because you know what? How many of you came here knowing there were going to be a lot of people here you've never met but you already knew? Almost every hand. Now, would I be right to guess that the reason you already felt like you knew them is because of live streaming? Okay? All the hands that go up. And so so when you do the support, It's not for, every time the money comes in, I don't give Robert and myself and everybody a raise. Okay? We buy more equipment. We're now purchasing a building. We do what we can. But also, we're taking care of the poor. Amen. Now, as far as your participation in that, you can do more direct participation by making sure you actually are sending in your stuff that says third tithe, and so that funds go into third tithe. But you're also able to, like when we keep feasts, and some people have done this, you can send in, if you have excess second tithe. I mean, look, let's say if you make $40,000 a year, and that's not a terribly high number. It's not, really low, really high. It's kind of that middle ground. That's $4,000. Well, maybe if you're just a single person or a couple and you're each making, that's more money than the two of you need to keep two feasts. That's more money than you need to buy extra stuff and enjoy yourself, as the feast says to buy what your heart's desire, like in Deuteronomy 14 and that kind of thing. And so you could send in a check that says, this is excess second tithe. Use it, please, to help somebody else come. And some of you have done that, and it's really been a blessing. I mean, we were going to help the people anyway, but that's your direct participation. Because after all, you're supposed to put it in the box at the end anyway, so why not put it in the box in advance and let us use it to help somebody? I mean, you can do the math. It's not real complicated. You know if you have more than you need. So that's something you can do before Passover. Some of you did it before Sukkot. As it starts to approach, and you go, you know what? I already know I've got more than I need. Let me go send a check for $200 or whatever it is. Maybe they could pay for somebody's meal plan a little bit or cover their registrations or something. Just think about the ways that you can do this. Because some of you are thinking, well, how do I handle this thing about the poor? Well, there's lots of ways. I just gave you a few. So hopefully that helps. Where's the mic? Okay, back here. Okay, Lisa.
Okay,
Elyada. What's up, buddy? Hi.
Good morning.
Yeah.
We were reading in 15, verse 23, and it talks about the pouring out the blood onto the soil, and it just clicked in my head of the scripture in Genesis when Cain kills his brother, and it says the soil cried out, or the blood cried out in the soil. So it just, is there significance, or I don't know, it just stuck out to me.
Okay. I don't know that there's a particular connection to that. Of course, anytime something connects in your mind, there may be a reason to kind of remind you of something. If nothing else, it reminds you of what happened with Cain. And so that would be there. I mean, the pouring the blood on the ground is not necessarily a commandment for a literal behavioral pattern that you always have to take the blood and pour it on the ground as opposed to disposing it in some other way. But the point was that there was a very common habit of drinking the blood fresh out of the animal. He said, no, when you kill the animal, let it drain. Okay, and that was the best way that they could do it at that point. And so that was the understanding there, like pour it on the ground. In other words, let it drain out. So it could have been almost somewhat of an idiomatic phrase for just let it drain out and be disposed of. Do not make any use of it. Okay, who's next?
Hi, Rabbi.
Hi, Deneba.
Could you please expand on chapter 15, verse 22? Eat it within your gate, the unclean and the clean alike. Because in case that if the Christian point this one out for their eating the pork, so therefore I can give them, an answer. Because this one, myself, I'm having a hard time understanding that scripture here.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you.
Clearly what this scripture is telling you is that you could throw kashrut out. Okay, just, There are a few places that mention this exact phrase, and what you have to understand is, again, with context, you have to ask the question, and I haven't talked about this actually this week at all. Let's talk about context again. So we have, who's talking, who's the audience, why are they talking about the topic, what is the topic, where are they? And so, okay, so we know that this is Moshe. He's talking to Israel. They're about to cross the Jordan. And he's discussing an overview of the things that they have covered in their journey, including the laws. And what he's trying to tell them here is that there are situations, here's the complication. As a Gentile, or as a, I don't know, because I don't know, some of you might have been Israelites out there in the world, because you don't know your bloodline, and really, for that matter, who cares? I mean, it doesn't matter. But you weren't eyes open, ears open, coming in looking for this. And so you probably had zero teaching on Tameh and Tahor. Okay, you were taught about being saved, being a believer. And these are labels, statuses. And then you came to find out through me that they're not statuses. But in Christianity, they were a status. But there is a status that's very important. It's called you're clean or you're unclean from a ritualistic point of view in terms of going into the temple and bringing your offerings, coming into the presence, the literal presence, not like when we come to a meeting like this, but the literal presence. Because some of you will get so excited about the stuff and fearful of it that you're like, but I'm unclean, I can't go to services this week. No, you're always unclean, and yes, you can come to services this week. This was specifically going into the Mishkan, the temple, the tabernacle, where Yahweh's presence physically, literally was. Because they were rules of engagement. To come into his presence, you had to be in a status called tahor. If you were tameh, unclean, you could not come into that presence, or if you tried, you'd get zapped. Because his presence cannot come into contact with either sin or death. Okay? That's why women, it's not sin when you have your monthly cycle, but it's connected to death, the loss of a potential life. Okay? Because you had a seed that was now your body was ridding yourself of it. So that was connected with it. And so you were then considered unclean. A man or a woman or anybody who had touched a dead animal would be unclean. So some of these things were not sin, they were just mechanically, you were somehow in contact with sin or death. And therefore you were unclean. So this verse is trying to explain to you that in these celebrations, that whether you, the person, are tameh or tahor, you can eat at that festival. Because the gazelle and the deer are clean. Okay? So he's simply saying that under other circumstances, if you were tameh, unclean, you would not be allowed to participate. So this, in the context, you have to say to your Christian friends, this is talking about the status of the participants, the people, not the animals. Amen? Now, they would not know that a gazelle and a deer were okay. They wouldn't know that a pig is not okay, I'm saying, or that shrimp is not okay. I mean, they don't know. So how are they going to know this? Because all they've been focused on is being a believer and saved, because those are the statuses they're taught about. Right? Okay. Or born again, or whatever other status label that people use. Well, the legitimate status labels are covenanted and clean and unclean. And you can still be covenanted and be unclean because you came into contact with sin or death. Now, you might only be unclean till evening or till morning, depending on whatever the thing says in the halakha, in the law, in the Torah. But you need to understand these things. Now, bear in mind, that doesn't make you, well, it still makes you unclean around between now and evening, but it doesn't affect anything for you because there's no Mishkan. There's no temple. Okay? So, no Torah has been done away with, but there are things that are no longer functional because the things necessary don't exist. So hopefully we understand that. Okay? And if those things were ever back in place, they would exist again. And now you're going to ask the question, well, how will we know what to do? Hopefully at that point, the anointed appointeds that exist will know what to do. Okay? It's not a problem right now, so I'm not worrying about it. And so when and if it does happen, I pray somebody will be around that actually knows what to do. And that will recognize it. It may be just that if that ever comes around, it's an end time thing, that the two witnesses will know exactly what to do. And so we'll listen to them. And we'll do what they say. Okay? So let's just keep that in mind. So that was a great question, because that comes up every time we go through the Torah cycle, because this isn't the only place this verse appears. This reference to the unclean and the clean alike shall eat, that comes up in 2 or 3 places, and it really can confuse people. It's like, oh, see? You can eat whatever you want. And the answer is yes, you can, as long as it's food. Go and listen to the teaching, Kashrut, what is food? Because pig is not food. Shrimp is not food. Do you ever watch a little kid, how they can put everything and anything in their mouth? They have no idea what food is. So just because you can put it in your mouth and it might even taste good doesn't make it food. There's a lot of really manufactured, processed, and chemically treated stuff that we eat that we think is food. That's not food. So, yes, you can eat any food you want. So when Yeshua in Mark 7 says, in the NIV it says, thus, this is added by the NIV, thus Jesus declared all foods clean. All foods were always clean. Or it wouldn't be food. Okay? Now, of course, that line doesn't exist in the Greek or anywhere else. I mean, Zondervan invented that line, stuck it in the NIV, the non-inspired version. Okay, so. All right, who's got the mic?
Sherry.
All right, Sherry, thank you.
Thank you. In 16:22, it says, "And do not set up a pillar, which Yahweh your Elohim hates." And I was thinking in 1 Kings 7:21 about Jacob, you see him setting up pillars to remind himself what God has done and different things. And Moses, again, in Exodus 24:4, sets up 12 pillars. And then I was thinking, a lot of times you say, go to the verse before and kind of look at the whole thing. And then it talked about, do not plant for yourself, this is in 21, an Asherah, any tree as an Asherah near the slaughter place of Yahweh. Yeah. And I was thinking, perhaps is it when we have something that's symbolizing something good in the body, but then it becomes bad, perhaps, that then it becomes evil in the sight of God? I wasn't really sure exactly how to read that because it seemed like a contradiction.
Okay, so this is again that context problem. 423-825-49. Okay, no. This is again one of those context problems, okay? We are disconnected culturally from understanding what was meant by the Hebrew phrase for pillar. We try to picture a very specific looking thing as a pillar. But the Hebrew word covers things that are stacked, cut, put up, that are vertical, that stand, and it could be all kinds of different things. And so we're talking here specifically Asherah. Okay, when you have an Asherah near the altar. So what did that look like? Well, it was made out of a tree. The pillars that were being set up, like by the 12 tribe pillars and things, were stacked up rocks. They were made with rocks, a very different thing. And so a pillar is not a pillar is not a pillar. The people here, because they would have seen them, would have known that there was very different things. So it's not so much that they did one and then someone else did it, but because I did it for a good reason, they're the same thing. That would confuse everybody, wouldn't it? And so it has to do with the context of it. And that's really the key thing. And so we, at times, can absolutely struggle understanding a book that was written so long ago for a people that at the time understood it very clearly. So it's written in a language they would have understood clearly. And so we are with this disconnect. Okay, I know I often say in some of the things when we do these teachings is that, I remember taking a class where we did some Old English. We had to read some books that were written in Old English, like Beowulf and those kind of things. Or, and when you're reading them, there's all kinds of phrases and words that are not being used the way you thought they were, because the understanding and the meaning has kind of changed over time. You ever go in a dictionary, and I'm not going to stop there and embarrass anybody. You ever go in a dictionary? Nobody, okay. No, but did you ever go in the dictionary and you notice that there are like 4 or 5 possible definitions, and some of them make no sense that they're for the same word? How could this word have such diverse meanings? You would think it would have, because you look at one definition, okay, well, all this kind of things, it says, okay, I get it. And then the second one might be sort of similar. Then there'll be a third one, like, well, how could that be the same word? How could these definitions all be for the same word? Because language evolves. We don't believe in people evolution, this whole evolution system for the universe, but certainly language does evolve. Over time, culturally, and through usage, the meanings change. And so a dictionary now has to encompass and show you all of the ways that they understand the word is being used and has been used. So now we're looking at Hebrew. Well, actually, you're not. Most of you don't have Hebrew in your book. You have English. So now you have people that have taken the time to take the Hebrew and do the best job they can to translate it. And while translating it, they had to choose one of the possible many uses the way that word was used. For example, when we translate the word tam or tamim, a lot of times you see in your Bible, perfect. There's nothing wrong with that translation, by the way. It just might not be the right one for that particular usage. In my teaching you, I've told you that more often than not in Scripture, it means the fullness of integrity as opposed to perfection. Okay? And so, but the translator had to choose. These are the possible uses of the word. Which one do I choose? Well, they're going to have to filter it through their own personal understanding of what the thing is trying to say. And so it's going to be through their biases. And that's where we get these problems. So hopefully that makes some sense about the pillar. Okay? Okay, next.
This is kind of a two-part question. First one, going back to the business of handling animals and kosher stuff and animal carcasses. Of course, I work in food service, and so I was wondering, is it wise to avoid the line of work where you might have to do that sort of thing, like handling, like, say, pig carcasses or whatever, if you have to trim them down, like butchering and stuff, or, just cooking?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not that it would be a sin to work in a restaurant and you're cooking shrimp or pork or some other thing, but I mean, I certainly would not be comfortable with that just because I would find out over time, I would just be like, ugh.
Right.
That's a technical term.
Right.
And so, that would be very challenging for me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? But I don't think it's a sin because you're making food and those that are not covenanted can eat it. And there's stuff that talks about and give this to the Gentiles or give that to the Gentiles or sell it to the Gentiles or whatever. There's certain things. Other things it tells you are not to benefit from. Things connected to idolatry. Those things you destroy. But other stuff you can give or sell and that kind of stuff. So I think it's more of a personal thing as to how do you feel.
Understood. Okay. And the second part, just backtracking a little bit, goes to the don't cook a calf in its mother's milk. Does that mean like in the literal sense, or does that have to do with like ingredients as they're broken down in fabrication? Does that translate to that, or?
No. It's really, I believe it's really very literal. I know it says it 3 times. The Jewish community wants to interpret it in a very extended sort of way, more of a sod and remez and hinted at and all this deep stuff. I believe there was, and some people say, well, they can't find it. Other people say they can find it. I think in history, there were fertility rituals where they literally boil a kid in its mother's milk. And you got to remember the culture at the time. The big thing Yahweh said over and over again was, do not do as they do in the worship of their Elohim to me. Do not treat me the same. And so those fertility rituals were all part of their religion, part of their way they would interact with their idols, their gods. And so for them to say that, I believe is really what it's talking about. Because you really have a challenge, and I've done this with some Orthodox Jews, and of course they don't like me anymore, but after I do it. No, but when they're talking about the kashrut, the laws about food and the issues of food, and we see this, don't boil a kid in its mother's milk. So of course then the Orthodox have separate kitchens with separate dishes and separate utensils and separate everything. And you wonder why they're all needing to be doctors and lawyers. It gets expensive to have separate everything. Son, you've got to be a lawyer or a doctor because it's expensive. As a Jew, we 2 of everything. Actually, as a Jew, do you need more than 2 of everything? Because you don't use the same stuff for the high holy days. You don't use the same stuff for Pesach. You don't use the same stuff for Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah. You have special dishes, and now you got 3. No, maybe you got 4. Now we need a bigger house. Get a second job. So I'm a doctor at night. I'm a lawyer during the day. So you're all basically up a creek now. You have to go out and make lots of money because after all, you need to spend and do all these things. Some of you are thinking, my set doesn't even have a complete set of forks. What do you mean 2 sets? Okay. I'm missing 3 spoons. I mean, Okay, so Of course, the challenge that I give them is I ask them, okay, so there's not cooking a kid in its mother's milk. What about Bereshit 18? Genesis 18. And so we have Yahweh appearing to Abram. And so Yahweh appears to, at this point, Abraham. And it says very clearly in the Hebrew, it's Yahweh. It doesn't just say the angel or the messenger. It says Yahweh. It says Yud He Vav He. Yahweh appears to Abraham. And so what does Abraham do? He calls out to his wife. He says, go get the calf and all these things. And then he says, and let me bring you bread and etc. And then Sarah runs to get this and make it all happen. And then what does he do? Verse 8, he takes the curds and the milk and the calf which he had prepared. You got to love it. All the stuff that he prepared. Thank you, Sarah. I get credit for this. Okay, Because I could just see while Yahweh and the other two were sitting there, Abram's like, I'll be right back. I got to get out the grill. Put on his apron. Got out his spatula. But he puts the calf and the curds and the milk in front of Yahweh. And he set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree as they ate. Now, of course, some of the Jews will say, well, actually, they ate the dairy first, and they waited an hour. I'm sorry, 2 hours. That's why I was looking in your direction, because I knew I had it wrong. No, I know. If you eat the meat first, you have to wait a lot longer, because it processes through the body. So, but they make the argument, well, they ate the dairy first while they were waiting for the calf, and there was 2 or 3 hours between, and so it's okay. I said, where exactly does it say that, please? Because here it says, in mine it says, and he took the curds and the milk and the calf, which he prepared and set it before them. Sounds to me like that all happened at the same time. Okay? And they ate it. Now also notice in the order of respect for authority, Abraham did not sit with them. He stood by while they ate. In total servant mode. Because if you were a servant in the house, you're not sitting there eating with the master of the house. And so some people miss that too. His respect for authority here, he says, oh no, I will get these things and put it for... See, he's known for his hospitality. That's where the reputation... Abraham was known for his tremendous hospitality. Of course, it wasn't tough to be hospitable to Yahweh showing up, and he knew exactly who was there. So the Jews don't really have a good argument for this, except to say, well, that was before Moses. Because after all, Yahweh changes, right? But you see the way they elevate Moshe. But yet they look at Abraham as their father. It's very, confused in the way their thinking gets. And they're not even aware of it because they just do what they do that they've generationally been doing. So no, there's not a problem with those things. I mean, look, there are reasons health-wise that probably, the way the body processes, you probably shouldn't have a cheeseburger. I don't eat them, but that's just because I don't like cheeseburgers. Because somebody will ask me sometimes, well, what do you think of a cheeseburger? I don't eat them. Oh, we shouldn't eat cheeseburgers. No, I didn't say that. I just don't eat them. Now, you can make an argument in a case for why we shouldn't, and I don't have a problem with that, but I'm simply saying is, from your point of view, the kid cooked in his mother's milk is not talking about the interaction of meat and dairy. Okay? So you don't have to worry about something being, fleischadik versus, That's why if you ever see in the stores, you guys are learning to look for kosher symbols, right? Did you ever see where it says parva? Do you know what that means? It means that you can eat it with meat. It's neutral. You can eat it with dairy or you can eat it with meat. It doesn't fall into either category. So you look for those things. All right? Okay. Next question. Okay, Amy.
It's not a question, it's an observation.
Okay, we don't do observations. Who's next? No, go ahead.
17, verse 14.
Oh, you're going to meddle now. You're really going to get people in trouble. 17. You went to chapter 17, 14. I know we got stuff. Go ahead.
Let me set a sovereign over me like all the nations that are around me. You shall certainly set a sovereign over you, whom Yahweh your Elohim shall choose. Set a sovereign over you from among your brothers. You are not allowed to set a foreigner over you who is not your brother. And then in 18. when you come into the land, and I will set a prophet over you like me, from verse 9 down to 17. It just makes me think of the people that we choose to our inputs, the teachers that we listen to.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you go outside of the body to listen to what this one's teaching and that one's teaching? Stay within the body. Who you put sovereign over you, your teachers are a sovereign over you. What you're allowing them to learn as they do and follow after their traditions and their, well, these ones tie their tzitzit like this, and these ones, all that. Watch who you're listening to and let it rule over you.
So I told you she was going to really meddle with you. Now listen to how this meddles, though. In Deuteronomy 17 and then going to 18 is very much about authority and structure. And so here, notice there's a difference between when you say, let me set a sovereign over me like all the Gentiles, let me set a sovereign, versus Deuteronomy 18, and I shall raise up for you a prophet. There's a difference between Yahweh raising up an authority versus you selecting one and setting one up. Great point, Amy. I mean, that's really a good point to connect together. By the way, when the kings were in existence and there were prophets to them, who was the higher authority? The prophet. Kings got nervous when the prophet showed up. Uh-oh. Because while kings are still there because Yahweh sets them up to whatever degree, the prophets are raised up. They're anointed, appointed from a much different place. And so, for example, a lot of the kings you see are the sons of a previous king or the sons of a previous king, etc. Not necessarily from the opening of the womb like you hear with Jeremiah. You don't see that integrity like you see with Samuel dealing with Saul. But you see how Saul was not all that excited when Samuel came in and said, Saul, didn't I not tell you what to do? What in the world am I hearing? What did you do? Why do I hear the bleating of sheep? Do you not understand directions? See, so when Samuel, something in this monitor just clicked out. There we go. He said, what part of this did you not understand? I gave you a direction. He's talking to a king. So there is a hierarchy there. And of course, the hierarchy started off with the people wanted a king, which is why Saul ended up being their king. Now Yahweh said, fine, if you want a king, I'll give you a king, because you need to learn and understand how dumb that is. So let's learn that lesson. So here's your king. But why did they want a king? Well, because all the Gentiles had a king. This goes back to do not do as they do. You know, we have a teaching. Whoops. You know, we have a teaching called do not do as they do for that reason, because that's a big deal. And that's part of the biggest problems you guys have in your walk, is that you're still doing some of the do not do as they do. Some of the things that you want to do and you still embrace fall into the category of, no, that's how they do and you shouldn't be doing. There are actually people in New York, in the Jewish community, that have Hanukkah bushes because they want a Christmas tree. So they have a Hanukkah bush. Huh. Look, do you know the difference between genius and, like, stupid? Genius has limits. Think about that for a minute. Okay? Stupidity has no limit. We want a Hanukkah bush. A what? I had a big argument with a ministry not too long ago over giving gifts at Hanukkah. I said, why do you do that? What do you mean, why do I do that? I said, why do you do that? Do you even know why Jews give gifts at Hanukkah? Do you not understand that it was started in the 1960s in the USA, mostly in New York? That it's not something that goes back to Mount Sinai or to the book of Maccabees, where Hanukkah comes from? No, it's not something where they were giving all these gifts on every night and all these things. It's a very recent thing. Okay, we're talking about only 50, almost 60 years, when this thing has been going on. To compete with, do not do as they do. Because after all the kids came home from school. My friends got 13 presents, blah, 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 Christmas. All right, I'm a Jew. We're going to outdo them. We'll give them to you for 8 days. You go tell them you got one, well, I got 8. So on the first day of Hanukkah, hey, what'd you get? Nothing. I got a present. Keep going, 8 days. Now I got to have separate dishes. I barely have a knife that matches, and I got to buy 8 presents for 8 days. This is getting expensive. And some of you are going to come out of the do not do as they do, and you're going to jump right into that whole let's treat Hanukkah like Christmas. Don't do it. Hanukkah has nothing to do with giving presents. That's a very recent ad that the Jews have done. Look, I know I raise a lot of interest in the fact that the Jews have a lot of things that we can learn from, but they are also on a side of the riverbank and not in the river, so to speak, and they're also doing things they shouldn't do. And so you don't need to imitate everything they do, but we do tend to go to them for answers to questions that we just don't know. Where's seat? Great. What's a seat? No, really. Well, you hang it on the fringe of your garment. Well, today's society, what's a fringe? There's lots of things that we would just not really know. What's it look like? Well, it's got white strings and a blue string and you tie knots. Well, why? How would you know that? Only because we can look to the Jewish community and say, well, you've been doing this longer than anybody. What do you do? How do you understand this? And I think you can really stand before Yahweh, and that's kind of the Deuteronomy 17 thing a little bit earlier in the chapter when it talks about when there's an issue where you don't know what to do, you go to the elders, those who've been doing this longer with the wisdom and the authority and the leadership. And we know in Genesis that a lawgiver will not depart from between the legs of Judah, between the feet of Judah. And so sure, we can get some insight from it. It doesn't mean they don't have some problems. They don't have some stuff that they've incorporated as well. So really good point to bring up here and how we can connect some of these things up. So we don't get trapped up into things. So I liked what Amy said, though. Are you setting up, and I think I talked about this the other day, you can't submit your authority to him until you regain your authority that you've already given up. Because you've given it up to other beliefs, other teachers, other people in your family or friends or whatever. You've allowed other people to jump up onto that chair and rule your life. You need to regain sovereignty so you can submit it to him. And I really haven't said that enough because I kept talking about getting off the throne, but it was implied. You can't get off something you're not on. How can you get off the throne and give it to him and let him reign? Like in the words of my daughter's song, which she got from listening to me on the phone counseling one day, when she says, you have to get off the throne, you're not your own, and so you're going to let Yahweh reign, sing praises to his name, right? That great song. But she got that when she was sitting in the car with me, listening to me counseling, and she heard me telling somebody, look, you're going to have to get off the throne. He's bought and paid for you. Let him reign. But you can't do that if you're not sitting there in the first place. So you're going to have to say, excuse me, can you get off so that I can get on so I can give it to him? Stop letting other people have such high authority in your lives. There should only be two sovereigns, you and him, and then you can give it to him and get off the throne. That's it. Amen? And then you can choose, Deuteronomy 17, to get guidance in that. You are not putting the Deuteronomy 17 person on the throne. You're going for guidance, for counsel, for a decision that you need to be made because you believe the Deuteronomy 17 person represents the king on the throne. And so the direct access that you can have to the king is through that person. Because you might pray about it and wonder when you're going to get an answer, if you're going to get an answer, and you're not necessarily going to hear a voice giving you an answer. But you can go to the anointed appointeds, the leadership that he's put in place, and say, We know that he has inspired you and guided you to understand his word at a higher level than the rest of us, because that's your job. Just like some of us have a higher level of ability to make music or to do math or to heal people and understand how the body works with health. We have anointings and giftings, and that we do. And so we know yours is to help us understand him and his word. So I'm coming to you to get an answer. But that's why it also says, if you go to them with that attitude, you are in big trouble if you don't do what they say. Now that scares the life out of half of you at least, if not more, because that sounds very controlling, dictatorial, and very dangerous and potentially abusive. And you're right. That's why you must vet, as I talked about. What did I say by vetting? I didn't say that you need to go and talk to everybody the person's ever known in their life and do an extensive background check. And, you have to do this kind of interaction. Then you have to go sit down and taste of it and say, let me see what counseling seems like when I get to know them. Because some of you think you know me because you've talked to other people. Well, have you talked to other people that actually have done this, what I'm talking about? Go talk to the people that counsel with me on a regular basis through Deuteronomy 17, can tell you about how that actually looks, feels, and functions. Then you might have an idea. But if you just go to one person, that one person had in their own opinion, a lousy experience, well, is that enough? You need 2 to 3 witnesses, don't you? Especially if the person said, well, I tried it once. Well, no, go find somebody that's doing it all the time. Okay, Nate and Dawn have raised their hands to tell you they've had testimonies of how they've done things on a regular basis. Dowie just raised his hand. Sarah Beth, Tricia. There are other people that are raising their hands. Helen Sue over here. And you could just ask them, well, what's been your experience in doing this over a period of time? Do you think that person is an anointed appointed? I'm not saying is like the Deuteronomy 18, the prophet, blah, blah, blah. I'm just saying an anointed appointed. Someone who has a role to give counsel and guidance in your life, and you're supposed to follow it. It's not for me or any other anointed appointed to say, I'm the anointed appointed, you must listen to me. That person, you should just run, okay? I mean, you hear that from anybody. Anybody's going to put apostle on their business card, you know what I'm saying? Or apostle, prophet, and all these other big titles. Because all they're trying to do is impress you, okay? It used to be on our website. My wife thought it was too strong, so I took it off, but maybe I'll put it back because I really like it. On the part where I put on the contact us and everything, and I put my name in, it used to say, Rabbi, shepherd, teacher, whatever offends you least. Now it says whatever you prefer or something like that. But, it was whatever offends you least. This is the reality we live in. All right, where's the mic? But take it seriously what Amy said. Why are you listening to other teachers? I'm not trying to tell you not to listen to other teachers ever and listen, but listening to teachings, get this clearly, is not the same as having them also as teachers. Because if you listen to a teaching, it's information. If you have a teacher, there's a relationship. Now you're allowing them to be the one that decides for you what you should be doing or not and giving you guidance and counsel. Just be careful how you treat those things. You need one teacher. You're more than welcome to listen to hundreds of teachings by other people. I will never tell you you can't listen to other teachers and teachings. But you will absolutely get confused if you don't have the one teacher you go to that you trust to say, I've been listening to a lot of stuff and I'm confused. My first answer will be because you're listening to a lot of stuff. What else is going to happen when you listen to a lot of stuff by a lot of different people with all the different perspectives and their growth and where they are? And 90% of them have only been doing this 5 years or less, so do they really even know what they're talking about on a serious basis? Not that they don't know anything, but I'm saying, is the depth of what they know, enough of the Christianese is out of there and all those other things that is still there. You can't get rid of that stuff in a short period of time. It takes a long time. Anybody know that, struggling with it still? It takes a long time. And not just for you, the teachers too. The teachers that came out of that place, it takes a long time. I think it's worse for the teachers because they were so used to teaching it, not just doing it and believing it, but teaching it. And so it's really hard to let that stuff go. Okay, I'm sorry. Where's the mic? Okay, Diana, go ahead.
Rabbi, I have a question about the third tithe.
Okay.
If you're coming into your third tithe, but you're in a financially bind, what do you do?
Okay. Good question. I'm going to change it a little bit to if you have any kind of a tithing problem because of your finances. Remember what I said in the tithing, appreciating the blessings? Tithing exposes either a selfish, greedy, whatever, a challenge with that kind of a thing, like wanting to possess, or it'll expose a financial problem. But it can expose either one of those. You may not want to give, even though you got plenty, just because I don't want to give it. Or, it's mine. Or you may actually have a legitimate, I don't have enough. If I give it, I won't be able to pay my bills. And so if you're in that situation, well, the first one you just need to work on. I can counsel you and help you with the getting over the pride and ego of it's mine and the selfishness. But most of you don't have that problem. The problem really is, if I do that, I'm not sure I could pay the bills. And so that's where you need counsel, because I will counsel you. And I might, don't take this as, Rabbi just counseled me from the microphone. No, I didn't. Be clear. But I might tell you some sort of a different process. Okay, he's still asleep. I was up at the same time he was. Where is he? Okay. I tease him relentlessly. Okay, so there in the process of dealing with tithing, I don't want you to tithe and then come to me for benevolence. Because then the money just sort of went in a circle. That's sort of a waste of time. So when you come to me, the first thing I'm going to do is help you figure out if there are giant leaks or small leaks. Oh, there they are again, the leaks. We can't get away from them. I mean, there may be holes in your budget where the money is just draining out. And I can help you see and go, well, why do you need to have this and this and this and this? Oh, I know you like it, want it, it's fun, it's enjoyable, whatever these different things are. But do you want to obey less than you want all this stuff? And so the same thing with benevolence, by the way. You may want to give somebody benevolence and then find out that they've got an iPhone, they've got full-on high-speed internet, they go to Starbucks twice a week. That person doesn't need benevolence until they fix that. Poor people don't even have internet. Poor people. Now, I may tell you if I'm your counselor that let's make sure you have the internet to do the live streaming if you live somewhere where you can't otherwise connect, but let's make sure to cut out these other things. There are things that poor people don't do that you do claiming you're poor. And so first I'll help you look at what you're doing and see if we can plug some of the holes. Now, if you still can't do it, then I may counsel you on how you're going to fix that so that you won't actually be tithing initially until we fix some of those things. But you don't get to make that decision without counsel. I'm not saying that you can't do it. You can go right ahead and do it. I think that's unwise, and I think it doesn't protect you, because if I give you that instruction, the onus of it, the risk of being wrong goes to who? Because Deuteronomy 17 says you've now transferred that responsibility to the counselor. Because otherwise you're called arrogant and a problem here in Deuteronomy 17 if you don't do. So it's not like you would come to me, because if you come to me just about normal things that I think you should be making up your mind on, I'm not going to make all your decisions for you. But something like this, look at my budget, look at my finances, I want to tithe, but I don't know how it's going to work, that needs help. And once you get that help, if you follow through with what the counselor gave you, the responsibility shifts to the counselor. So don't any of you sit there going, okay, I'm going to parse Rabbi's words and apply it to my life so I don't have to make a phone call. No. Everybody's situation is unique and individual. There's nothing I said that you can now do on your own without help. You can try to fix the holes, yes. But as to whether or not to tithe or partially tithe or to handle your finances in whatever way you cannot make that decision on your own. Well, I shouldn't say that. You can, but you shouldn't. So don't take anything I say as a way to do that. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay? Because you don't want to stand before the throne and say, And he says, well, why didn't you do this or why do that? Well, but I heard a thing the rabbi said and I just applied it the way I thought I should. As opposed to, well, why didn't you go get counsel? Because he also said, go get counsel. Because he'll know what I said. He knows everything. He said, no, he said, get counsel. Don't quote him wrong. And so you want to get counsel. And it's not that I like to sit there all day dealing with everybody's finances and budget, but I do actually have a background in finance and budgeting, and I can do that. So hopefully that makes sense. Thank you, Diane, for the question. Okay. Where's the mic? Okay.
I noticed in readings this morning that there was 2 places where it says, you shall purge the evil from your midst. One is in 17:7 and the other's in 21:21. And the way they were doing this purging was pretty drastic. It was by death and, like stoning, hanging. So my first question is, who was this referring to? Because in verse 2, it says, when there is found in your midst in any of your cities, which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you, a man or a woman who does what is evil in the eyes of Yahweh your Elohim, in transgressing his covenant. So I would think from that it was people who were in his covenant, but then it says, and has gone and served other mighty ones. So my first question is, who is this referring to? And my second question is, how or does this apply to us today?
Okay, so first of all, Yvonne, good job of trying to go back and find the context. In this particular case, the context goes back to verse 8. It doesn't go all the way back to verse 1. Because in verse 8, even though verse 7 it talks about purging evil out of your midst, there's different types of evil. But all evil is doing what? Going against what Yahweh designed something to be used for and how it's supposed to be done. He calls that evil. By the way, there's another verse where it talks about purging out the evil, and we see that in terms of verse 12. Okay? Where a man who doesn't do what the instructors of Torah tell him to do, this is acting arrogantly and it's evil. So we have to remember that we have to expand our understanding of the definition of evil, because this is a challenge for a lot of people. Because we think of evil as being limited to rape, murder, these horrific things. That's evil. Pedophiles, whatever, right? Evil. Yes, those things are evil. But so is going to leadership, asking them for guidance and ignoring what they say. So is going and bowing down to an idol. So these things are all considered evil. Anything that's in opposition to Yahweh in a conscious decision-making way. In other words, you choose to go against Yahweh, that's evil. Yahweh says, go to leadership, get an answer, do what they say. You don't, that's evil. Yahweh says, don't bow down to idols, you do it, that's evil. Now Yahweh says, don't murder, you do it, that's evil. He tells you not to sleep with children and all these other things and animals, whatever. You do any of those things, that's evil. Anything that Yahweh says not to do and you go and do it by choice, knowing that you're not supposed to do it because he told you not to, these are, you're right, covenanted people. So Yvonne, that part you're correct about. But realize that as you're reading through, in this particular case, for example, in verse 12, it's talking about those who, when a matter arises. When you look at the one in verse 7, we're talking about specifically the person that has gone and bowed down to idols. So you have different contexts within this one chapter. But the bigger context is all of these people are choosing to do something they should know better not to do, because they are covenanted people. Now, as far as purging the evil out, it talks about putting them to death. Wow, that's a big deal, isn't it? Now remember, in the context here, are we talking about Israel scattered at this point? No, we're talking about a cohesive corporate nation. And the whole point of these laws is not only to teach you how to function individually, but how to function as a nation, how to keep you safe, but also how to keep the nation safe. Because the responsibility of the leader is to keep everybody safe. And if you have people doing evil, whatever that is, anything that Yahweh said not to do and you're doing it, won't that be a danger to the body as a whole if that's allowed to continue? And so they needed to be very strong and strict to say, look, if you're going to do evil, you're going to die. So let's not do that. Let's not do evil. Now, we're not talking about these sins by error, sins by the fact that you're still dealing with stuff in your life. We're just talking about, look, there are some bigger deals. Like, because if you're going to go to leadership, for example, well, let's go back to the one that you first quoted. If you're going to bow down to an idol, okay, well, you know what? That's about as clear as it gets. That part, none of you can say, well, I didn't know what I was doing, and I got caught up, and, it's not like some of the other sins that you can do. And Yahweh takes that very seriously. He's a zealous God. He's an ardent God, as far as being the verses that he uses. But then you look at this other one, then why does he do it in verse 12? It says, and the man who acts arrogantly so as to not listen to the priest who stands to serve there before Yahweh. That is where it defines what an anointed, appointed looks like. It's not just because he's a Levite. He's the one that stands before Yahweh. He's the one who stands to serve there before Yahweh. Find that person. Not the one person on the whole planet, but the person that he leads you to that does those things. We call them, I use the phrase anointed, appointed. Curtis likes to use the phrase fivefold. Those people that are legitimate fivefold ministry people. I don't have a problem with that definition. But find those people. But he says if you act arrogantly, that's a really good word for that, because if so you go and ask for advice, get advice, and choose not to do it, that's arrogance. Because you're basically saying, I don't like your advice, I'm smarter than you, I'm going to do what I want anyway. Well, then why did you even go to ask? Well, probably because you were hoping it would be the thing that you wanted to hear and you could justify and get permission to do what you wanted to do. Some of you have heard me say this to you. You've called me up and said, blah, 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 I don't know what to do. And my answer has sometimes been, is it that you don't know what to do? Or you know what to do and you're hoping I will give you permission to do something different? Some of you have heard that. I've not said it to just one person. I say it a lot. Because people call me up, and sometimes the thing they're asking me is something I really feel confident they probably know. And I'm like, well, why are you calling me? Well, because I don't know what to do. Really? Because some of the times I know it's a thing you probably know what to do. Or is it because you really don't want to do it? Or you know you shouldn't do it, but you really want to, and you're hoping I'll tell you it's okay. Because you actually knew that if I say it's okay, the burden shifts to me. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to give you that out. If the burden should be on you, I'm going to put it right back and say, you need to first convince me you really don't know what to do. That you're not just fishing, for permission. Okay, that should be a little phrase we could use. We put that in focus. No fishing for permission. Don't call an anointed, appointed, fishing for permission to do what you want to do or to not do what you don't want to do, even though you know what you should be doing or not doing. You already know those things. So why are you calling fishing for permission? Don't do that. Only go to the leadership when you actually know that you don't know. Or go and admit, I really want to do this. I know I'm not supposed to, and I need help with that. Now you're not fishing for permission, you're looking for guidance and counsel. I'm struggling with something. I want to do this or I don't want to do that, and Yahweh says the opposite, and I'm struggling. And so now you need help with counsel. It's not about fishing for permission. So then we deal with the arrogance, because it says if you are arrogant, if you're going to do what you want to do, so just remember that when you call leadership for counsel. If you're not planning to actually do what they say, don't call. I don't think I could be more clear about that, because you put yourself at this risk of being looked in his eyes as being arrogant. And he calls that evil. Do you want to do evil? No. Don't you call leadership not planning to do. Now, if you're vetting that leadership and you're trying to see things out, that's different. But if you've already come under that leadership and you recognize that leadership and you're calling for counsel and guidance for what to do, and then you need to do what they tell you. Oh, that's scary. You bet you that's scary in both directions. You better have vetted out that leader. How do you vet them out? I told you, go to them with other things. And that process is not covered here in terms of it being evil or not if you don't do it, but you're trying to figure it out. But really, if you're going to vet, you should try to do what they say to see how it works. You really should. Then how would you know otherwise? How are you going to know unless you try it? That's why I say to people, if you're going to counsel with me and we're having that challenge with leadership, I say, would it kill you to give me 6 months and just trust and see what happens? maybe that could really fix a bunch of things in your vertical alignment, and he could start blessing you. And again, it's not because I know everything and it's so brilliant, or whoever the anointed appointed is knows everything and they're so brilliant, but it gets you back in line with him properly. And so that's really important. So thank you for bringing that up, because I think that we don't understand that calling leadership and not doing what they say to do is actually evil. Although we are not going to take you out and stone you, okay? And you laugh. I would be breaking Torah if we didn't stone you, unless there was a reason why it would be wrong to stone you. Why would it be wrong to stone you? Because there are other parameters that have to be in place in order to implement that part of the law. We have to be, first of all, what did I ask you earlier? Corporate nation together, not a dispersed nation. We have to have the system of judges in place. We need to have the temple. There are things that have to be in place. Because any of you get this question when you start telling people keeping Torah, they go, oh, what are we going to start stoning people now? Oh, is that what you're going to do? My first thought always is, I think we should start with you. Great idea. Because you're mocking the Most High. So it's not just a joke. They're mocking the Most High. But my answer is, no, we're not going to start stoning people, because that would be breaking the law. Not because it's been done away with. It would be breaking the law. Because the law requires you can't stone unless all these other... Did anybody remember the woman caught in adultery? Anybody not know my routine on that? Almost all of you have heard it before. Okay, so that's pretty good. So I'm not going to necessarily do the whole thing just for the one or two hands, but you can go look it up, and we have it online. I think it's actually an In Focus or something, and we can find it, the woman caught in adultery. It's an In Focus, I think? No? David, you cataloged them. Is it In Focus? Check. Okay? But you can find the woman caught in adultery as part of a teaching, as we deal with, I think it's John chapter 8. But realize that everything, I'll just do this real quickly, is about the law. The reason that they were not to stone her is because the law required them be corporate Israel. Were they corporate? Yes. Was there a temple? Yes. Were there judges? Yes. Did they take her to the judges? No. Oops. Problem. What was else you needed? 2 to 3 witnesses. Where were they? Nowhere to be found. Matter of fact, who had the right to throw the first stone? The witnesses. See, if you don't know Torah, you have no idea what's going on in John 8. 6? John 6 or John 8? Where is it? Because now I'm not remembering my chapters here. No one focus on that, but where is it? I got the total wrong chapters here. 8:4? There it is. Okay, so John 8. So I had it right. Okay. So realize that when the church tells you this is an expression of his tremendous mercy and how Messiah loved us so much that instead of letting her get stoned, he overrode the law and told her to just go and and take some flowers with you too. And some beads. Well, what is he, from the 60s? Listen, he didn't look like you see in the movies. He scared the you-know-what out of the money changers. He was a carpenter. And carpentry wasn't like taking wood and putting it into the giant saw and letting the machine do all the work. Okay? And using like a battery-operated drill or screwdriver or staple gun or nail gun no, these guys had to work and wield big hammers and cut things. He was probably a pretty big guy. Solid. He scared people when he was in there throwing those tables around. Not the guys who come in there. What are you doing in my father's house? Wait a minute. Okay, I better stop. That's like you watch the movie, We have to understand what really was going on in that situation with the woman caught in adultery. It was all about the law. And so Yeshua says to her, where are your accusers? In other words, this law requires there be accusers. Everybody's left. So he says, well, I can't accuse you. I wasn't there. I didn't see what happened. So go and don't be involved in this mess anymore. I don't think she did anything, and you'll have to go watch the story. It was all a setup to try to accuse him. Okay? Because I think if she had done anything, he would have brought her to the right people who would have done the research and looked for the witnesses. Hey, this woman's been accused. I don't know what to do with her. Take her over here. Go look for witnesses. Okay? So this is part of what Christianity's use of like saying, oh, see, he overrode the law. He stopped them from stoning her. Mercy is higher than the law. His love is higher than the law. Crazy stuff. And by the way, that would put him in a problem with Deuteronomy 17, too. He'd be acting arrogantly to make decisions above the law. He did everything that the law said. Listen to the teaching called, what's the teaching I'm going to tell you about right now? What did Yeshua do? He kept the law perfectly, didn't he? And if you go look at that teaching, we probably need to redo that. It's an old one. But what did Yeshua do? Some of you are thinking, no, it's only one part. Leave it that way. Okay. It'll turn into 23. I don't need to have 23 parts. Today, all right, we're going to be in part 32 of what did Yeshua do? Okay. Where's the mic? Okay. Go ahead.
Hi. I'm going to speak about Deuteronomy 10 to 14.
Which chapter?
Deuteronomy 21.
21, okay.
10 to 14. I sort of paraphrase this, how I understood how things happened during the war. So during the war, they get to take beautiful women, probably against their will, and they were probably traumatized. And these women get 1 month to grieve for their family. Then the man gets to take her, and if he has no delight in her after he takes her virginity, he then is able to send her away. My question, I think I have two here. What kind of justice is this for a traumatized woman? And what happens if she has no delight in her new husband that she probably never wanted to marry in the first place?
Okay. Did everybody catch all that? Okay, so this is part of our challenge of Scripture, is that is absolutely one way you can interpret what you read. I think it's actually the opposite and backwards. But that's not personal. But it just also depends on where you're coming from, what your experiences have been, and what your filters are. And I don't know anything about your background. I'm just saying, but that can happen. So let's look at the situation maybe for another perspective. Now, I'm not saying she's wrong and I'm right and vice versa, but there's another perspective. There's been a war. The men are all dead. She's traumatized, but she's not nothing. She's traumatized with fear. How am I going to take care of myself? I'm going to just be out on the streets. And it says here that if you see one of these women, and in your heart, in your compassion, you would like to take her in, because after all, remember, it's not just because she's pretty, because you're going to shave her head and cut her nails and not make her so pretty. To prove that it's not just because she's pretty. That doesn't mean she's going to want to be, like you said, married to you and taken care of by you. But if you're caring for her and you want to provide those things for her, then prove that it's not just about her being, hey, that's a hot mama, I want her just to have sex with her. But I want her as wife to provide, protect, and take care of this woman whose husband is dead, or all the men in her life are dead. Now, of course, she may not like this and not choose to want to be a part of it, and that's when he can say, well, what can I do? I tried to provide for, otherwise she had nothing, was likely to just die unprotected, unprovided for. So you see how it could be from either direction? It's not just the traumatized woman who's being yanked out and taken to marry, but this is a woman who's traumatized, yes, but also petrified. I'm alone. Everybody I know and the men are all dead, and this other nation has come in. I don't know what to do now. And so in a compassionate way, this person could be saying, no, I find her appealing to be actually a helpmeet, a wife. I would take her and provide and protect for her. So it's not like, hey, I took her for sex, and I'm not pleased with her, she's not pleased with me, whatever, boom. Okay? So let's be really clear about this. Because if you look at verse 14, it says, do not treat her harshly. Okay? This is all about demonstrating that you actually want to make her a wife. Wife is a big deal. Wife is your other part of you. That doesn't mean she wants to be the wife, but then again, there was a lot of arranged marriages. There was a lot of things going on where the person ended up being wife that wasn't because they wanted to be. Jacob went, excuse me, Abraham sent his servant to find a wife for Isaac. Had she ever met him? Nope. Did she know whether she was going to like him or not? Nope. Did she know what he looked like? Nope. She was going to go marry him. When she left to go with the servant, she had agreed to go marry him. So culturally, this is different than we think. We date people, we get to know them, we spend time with them, we decide how we feel about them. That wasn't always the way things were done. Because it was much more concerned about, can you protect me and keep me safe and provide for me? We're going to see the movie Fiddler on the Roof on Saturday night, and Tevi goes to Golda, do you love me? She's like, what kind of stupid question is that? For 20-something years, I've been with you, I've made your food, I've cooked for you, I've cleaned for you, I've raised your children, I've done all these things. If that's not love, what is? Culturally, it was like an absurd question. They met on their wedding day. That's when they first met. So you got to remember, when you're looking at this, we're in a very different culture. But I would rather you look at the full perspective of what really was this woman experiencing. She was a woman in a society dominated completely by men, and it was a very violent society, running around with swords and occupations and raping and pillaging and all these things. And what kind of a life do you think she had in front of her if she had not had a man take her in? But Israel, to have a law that would help make sure that she was taken in by somebody who didn't just want a sex toy, to be blunt or whatever, but wanted a wife. So they would have to humble her. Well, not humble her, that was kind of referring to the sex part. They would have to shave the head and cut the nails. In other words, that wasn't a literal thing just to do that, although I'm sure they did. It was about, prove it's not about her looks. Because it starts off by saying that she is fair of form. Well, that's not enough. You got to be willing to take this stranger from another country's people, and we conquered that land, and say, no, I'm going to take her in as full respected and honored wife. So you see how that could be a whole totally different way to look at it? Okay? Because yes, this woman was traumatized, but she was also afraid. And not necessarily afraid of him, but afraid, if I don't have anybody, now what am I going to do? It was a very much more scary world than today. Women today can be very independent, can take care of themselves very nicely, thank you very much. Some of you women think, I can take care of myself, thank you very much. That was not necessarily the case back then. That's why they had a ketubah for the wedding. And in the ketubah, it was a prenup. People get all upset about signing a prenup. They always did. But the prenup was different. The prenup was written by the groom with the father of the bride, where the father of the bride said, hey, I am not letting you take my daughter unless it says in here that if you ever find her unpleasing or whatever and you want to kick her out, she gets this many sheep and this much this and this much this so that she can survive. That was written in the document. All right, but it's a great question. It brings up a good point because that is a little bit of a confusing section. Okay? And certainly with all the abuse of women and everything else that's going on, you could see how you might think, whoa, how is that okay? But I think it's actually from the point of view of how some of those women may be found attracted by the men, and the men can take them in and take care of them and protect them. Because now they're really pretty much up a creek. They're really in trouble. All right, next question. Steve Waffle, go ahead.
What did I do? Go back. Okay. This is going back to 16 where it says, guard the new moon of Aviv. And I know elsewhere in the scripture it talks about from new moon to new moon and Sabbath to Sabbath. Please explain how the new moon is important, but it's not always the Sabbath.
423-825-49. I'm going to use that a lot now. I mean, that's brilliant. That is just brilliant. Only problem is, no, actually, Robert will get the phone first. So, hey, that's not a bad idea. I was about to say, the only problem is you get me anyway. What's Rabbi Tom's number? I start giving that out.
It's live. Be careful.
Okay. Now, that's a good question. Okay, look, we are told to guard the new moons, to celebrate the new moons, to observe the new moons, because really, they didn't have nice wall calendars, and some of them didn't even have nice walls to put the wall calendar on. You didn't just go to your, Walmart and pick up a new calendar, or Office Depot, wherever you go to, to a place to pick up a calendar. As a matter of fact, you probably get them sent to you by, junk mail for free. I mean, especially if you're Jewish, connected to any Jewish organization, they're happy to mail you a calendar. Or the banks will mail you a calendar. And there are lots of places you can get a free calendar. They didn't have all that. As a matter of fact, you have one on your phone. So they needed to track time and be aware of time. And they had to have ways to mark time and be aware of where are we in the calendar cycle, the moon cycle, so we know when the feasts are. I mean, I don't know about you, but sometimes I go home and I think, okay, wow, it's September already. Or it's almost September. And you start realizing, well, you do that by looking at your calendar. Well, they had to look at the phases of the moon and realize how close they were getting to something and find a way to track time. Because otherwise they could be in disobedience and miss the feasts. So this was an important thing when he said, that's why he says, guard the moon of Aviv. And make sure that you perform the Passover in that month. And that's the important thing. Now, for all of you out there, I don't know how this ends up, but we have people that love to find one little thing, get obsessed about it, and make a big deal out of it. There's no place, in my opinion, there's no place in Scripture that tells you to go running around looking for Aviv barley to determine when your calendar starts. Nowhere. It refers to the month that Passover's in as the month of Aviv, because that's also the month that would be where you would see the barley become Aviv, the state of the barley. But also, if you're a Jew, that's the way you say spring. See, but you wouldn't know that if you weren't Jewish, because you all become Hebrew experts as soon as you are in this for 5 minutes. And you're smarter than the Jews, because the Jews apparently don't know what it means from evening to evening. They don't understand what it means, in between the evenings, you shall slaughter the Passover, because the Jews don't understand this language, and they're all wrong and messed up. So I'm going to be smart as a Gentile who's been studying Hebrew for 3 minutes, and I'm going to change all that because they're wrong. And you're laughing, but this is what people do. So when I tell people between the evenings means afternoon, they go, oh, no, it doesn't, blah, 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 blah. Because they're trying to argue, well, are we doing it between the 13th and the 14th, and on the 14th and the 15th? Look, they understand that on the 14th means it's already the 14th. Between the evenings means afternoon. So guess what? The 14th in the afternoon, you kill the animal. It's not that complicated. But you have to understand the Hebrew and the idiomatic phrases and how they were used. And by the way, that's one of those things that you might want to go find out what the Jews understand, because after all, it's their language, and they've been doing it for longer than anybody else, and they just might have an understanding. Okay? Any of you speak a language, like fluently from birth? Okay, what do you speak? Swedish, okay? So let's say I studied 2 years of Swedish, and I'm now going to correct him on understanding Swedish. And that's assuming I actually studied it for 2 years. Most of these people have studied Hebrew for like 3 seconds because they looked up some things in the Blue Letter Bible or something, or an interlinear. Now they think they know everything. And you've heard me tell the story. I'm on Facebook, almost never. I happened to see somebody ask a question nobody was answering. It was an easy enough question in my opinion, so I typed in a quick answer. It was not even in one of our groups, it was another group. And immediately the trolls jump in telling me what an idiot I am and how I got it all wrong. And I said, excuse me, because I'm thinking this is a great opportunity to expose and show to people just how these trolls operate. I said, so before I get involved with you, I said, just exactly, because you say I don't know what I'm talking about with the Hebrew and everything. What is your background and how, in terms of knowing Hebrew? Well, the answer came back. I've got 2 Israeli friends and a Blue Letter Bible. Clearly a scholar with a doctorate. And I said, well, excuse me, but I started out in, pre-nursery school and Hebrew school, got fully bar mitzvahed. I might know it a little more than you. Maybe. As a Jew. Wait a minute. The Jew thing is we have no necks. Okay. So next time I'm going to ask you, why don't Jews have necks? Okay. I told that joke when I was working in the insurance business, and the guy I told it to, he literally, like, picture an office like with those booths, little separated little walls, and he made me walk around the entire office and tell that joke. He thought it was the funniest joke he ever heard. And walk around, why don't Jews have necks? I'm doing this like, from booth to booth. And in the back of my brain, I'm going, you're an idiot. Why are you letting him do this to you, walk you around? But they thought it was funny, so I kept going around. A question I should have said is, why are you going around telling the stupid joke? Okay. So let's stop listening to, the guys out there, you know who they are, that are promoting the whole Aviv barley thing and everything else, as if they know what the word means. As a matter of fact, some of them put out videos, and I've had farmers tell me that they're showing barley that's not Aviv, claiming it's Aviv. They don't know what they're doing very often, okay? And so when it says guard the new moon is to let you know where you are in time. That's what Genesis tells us, that the signs in the heavens to let you know where you are, seasonally, day by day, month by month, etc., or moon by moon. Now, we're not going to get into an argument about dark moon and crescent moon and all this stuff, but just understand that these are things that have been thought about for a long time. And so we don't have to worry about those things right now, because you listen to the calendar decision teaching, you understand why we're doing what we do. And it's not because, for those of you who might be watching that don't know us and know the teachings, the making the calendar decision teaching you really should listen to. It's only one teaching, one part. But it explains why we're keeping the calendar we are, but not from the point of view of why it is right and the others are wrong, but why it is, I believe, the right one for us to do at this time. Why the choice was made. Okay? It is not there to argue and point out why your calendar is wrong and my calendar is right. It's not my calendar that we chose anyway. And by the way, I had one. I was involved in that whole mess, about 15, 18, 20 years ago, where I came up with what I thought the calendar should look like. It's irrelevant. I thought it didn't bear the fruit, any fruit that I would have thought it would, etc. And I came to learn, and you hear that in the calendar decision teaching. So does that answer your question, Steve? Okay? But let's not be caught up on this whole Aviv thing. Because until you can answer this question, this is the question you need to answer about, I want to ask those Aviv guys this question, all right? Let's see, where can I find it? Okay, so the very first place the word Aviv shows up, that's what they like to show because it proves what Aviv means, is in Exodus 9 when it says that with the hail falling, that the flax and the barley was smitten, for the barley was in the head, or Aviv, and the flax was in the bud, but the wheat and the spelt were not smitten, for they were later crops. Okay, so now picture this. I don't know how long you thought the plagues took, because you watch the movie, right? We all watch the Ten Commandments, we see whatever movie, and it seems like they're almost like every other 3-4 days, boom, another plague comes. Maybe it took a little longer, I don't know. Does anybody actually think it took more than a year? And the reason I'm saying that is because they left Egypt, it says, in the month of Aviv, because, wait a minute, but it says here that the Aviv things were destroyed by the hail. Oh, I'm sorry, but if that's not good enough for you, the locusts come next, and it says that they ate everything that the hail didn't destroy. In verse 12 of chapter 10, he says, and the locusts to come on the land and eat every plant of land, all that the hail had left. So how much Aviv things were they looking at as they're leaving? Anything? No, nothing. So spring is probably the better understanding. It's in the time of the year when things bloom. Why do we have the word spring? Because things spring to life. They spring forth. So Aviv is used the same way. Are we all understanding that now? But yet we are completely overrun by calendar-obsessed, crescent new moon, dark new moon, local time, Israel time, Colonel Mustard with a candlestick in the library. I mean, that's what it kind of gets to be. Well, our group, we keep the crescent according to Israel time, and we, well, we do the dark thing according to where it is, where we are, and then, there's too many variables to worry about. Well, we wait to see where the Aviv is, but do you know, any of you live in places like in Canada, other places near where there's farming? Does everything come to harvest exactly at the same day in the same week? No. So that kind of is problematic too if you're looking for the Aviv, because you can find it in parts of Israel and not in others, because it doesn't all come to that level at the exact same time. Now they're close, within a week or two, but it's not the same day or even the same couple of days. So that's one of those, we'll call it a red herring. It just doesn't, it doesn't play out. It's just a distraction. That's part of the calendar decision. You understand why we make these decisions the way we do. Okay, where's the mic?
Thank you.
Okay, Janet, go ahead.
Yes, Rabbi, I have 3 questions, sorry. My first question
that is the limit, by the way, so you're okay.
Okay. My first question was actually a question I asked before about a matter shall be established by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. And in my mind, I kept thinking about my children. We have 3 kids. And I was thinking, well, if one of them has an issue and they claim that one of the other ones did something to them, they come to us, should we apply that principle as we sort out what happened and establish the discipline on them? That's my question, my first question. My second question
is...
why
don't I just do them one at a time?
Okay.
Okay, so the first question, what is the key thing to the 2 to 3 witnesses thing? It's not only that they are agreeing that something happened, but they have to be witnesses, and do this with your children. And this would fix our whole criminal justice system if this was done, at least the lawsuits part of it. They must understand, because they can have an agenda, that if it turns out you're lying, you get the punishment. That's the key. You would have a lot less false accusations, and there's tons of that out there. I deal with it on a regular basis. You deal with it on a regular enough basis. Your friends and family saying, oh, they're Jews now, and they're this, and they've rejected this, and they've rejected that. And, well, really? People throw things around really just very loosely. The key thing for the witnesses, though, and this is why they dropped the stones in John 8 with the woman with the adultery thing, is because he said he was without sin, meaning a true witness, cast the first stone. But you understand by that phrase, and they did, the older ones did first. You notice they dropped the rocks and left before the younger. They were like, checkmate, he got us again. Because the way he phrased it was that, if you're a false witness, we're going to stone you. So with your children, yes, you should go for the witnesses, but yes, they should know if you don't tell the truth, and I find out, and I will, you might not, but tell them you will. Scare them. They don't know. They think you might know everything. Sometimes they think parents at a certain age, they think you just somehow know everything. So, but tell them if it turns out you're lying, you're going to get the punishment. Because sometimes if you have more than, if you have 2 or 3 children, so you got enough to have 2 witnesses, they may conspire against the one. So I wouldn't just trust the witness of 2 children against another child. But you might want to throw it in there. I'm going to hear what you have to say, but you need to know if it turns out that you're not telling the truth, this is going to come back on you big time. Okay, second question.
Second question is a follow-up from food. We love to go to Chipotle, and I know they do pork, steak, chicken. And so if they use the same grill to cook the meats, is that considered something unclean that we shouldn't eat? Cross-contamination, I guess.
Okay, so that's a big question. 423-825-4975. I've got my own opinions on that. Perhaps that's something we need to bring up with the leadership to come up with an official MTY policy on. So why don't I postpone that? Because some of these things, I don't have a problem giving my opinion because they are MTY policy. And other things we've not actually talked about in the leadership so that we can make it official. Okay?
Yes, and a final question. Thank you, Rabbi.
Wait, hold on. I actually want to write that down so I remember that we're going to do that. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, Devarim 19:20 is the last verse, 23, I think. And let your eye not pardon life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, and foot for foot. And then if you go to Matthew chapter, I think it's 5, when Yeshua is saying, you heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the wicked, but whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him, and so on. So I guess I wanted, if you wouldn't mind, expanded explanation on what Yeshua said.
Well, he just overrid his father, and we just have to change things.
Be careful, it's live.
Okay, can we understand that there are things in the halakha, in the Torah, in the way that we walk, the laws, the instructions on how to walk, that people have not understood to be pictures of what we need to do and metaphors and hints at policy, and they started taking it literally, or they limited it to the literal. And in Matthew chapter 5, that's a lot of the discussion. Okay, you've heard of old not to murder. Okay, so I didn't kill him. Oh, but you wanted to. He's trying to give a deeper understanding. He's also saying, look, eye for eye, tooth for tooth is about what? I know, but what's the point of it? Justice, equal weight. Okay, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Not like, well, you killed my cow, so now you have to give me all you own in your house. No, cow for cow, right? Whatever, it's about justice and being fair, that things are reasonable, rational, and appropriate in terms of measure for measure. And Yeshua is trying to say, while that is true, we should be trying to avoid that problem and fix it ourselves and not be going for, just because someone did something to you, you need to get something back. How about go there and try to figure it out? How about understand that maybe your brother did it for a different reason and he needed something? Instead of just saying, well, he took my jacket. Well, what if he really needed a jacket? Maybe you should go over there and figure out if he needs anything else. And so it's not changing or altering that. He's saying that principle is good about fairness, but maybe you need to go deeper into it to see what's going on beyond that. Does that answer the question? Okay, last one. Oh, that was it, okay. Okay, Laura?
Okay, so in 18, chapter 9, 10, 11, this is something that I'm seeing in society today when they're talking about the use of magic, the interpretation of omens and sorcery and conjuring spells and meditation and spirits are the ones who called upon the dead. One of the things that I find that's very disturbing is, even going through Asheville on our day off, walking through the little courtyards and stuff, every second store was selling mystic items, and there was tarot card readings that you can go to and all of that. And then when you turn on the TV, and this is probably what disturbs me the most about my grandchildren, is that every cartoon that they watch has wizards and witches and demons and spells, and the toys that they buy are all bibbidi-bobbidi-boo stuff. And it's teaching a culture to our children from a really young age that this sort of stuff is acceptable and okay. And I guess that's just wanting to have your take on that.
Okay, so to answer this question, I don't know, in the back, Dale, somebody go on my desk. I think that's where I left my wand. I might need that for... Dale's actually going to look for it, but anyway. Maybe my pen can work for this. Because in some of those magic stories, the pen turns into something. It's a sword. No. Okay. There is an obsession with some of these things. I think the problem is that look, I remember growing up and all you do with a lot of these movies, a lot of these books, a lot of these stories, and I think that it's not really a challenge if instructed correctly where I don't think I've ever thought of it as being real. I thought of it as being entertaining. And so I think that we have to then work with our children just to make sure they understand it's entertainment. Even though entertainment tends to be a lot of that sort of beyond reality, because it's an escapism in our mind as opposed to thinking magic is real and all this stuff is real and demons and other things. Sorry, I almost knocked the microphone off. So it was a demon possessed me to get rid of the mic and knocked it. And so I think there should be concerns, but I think we have to be careful with where that goes and how that turns into some sort of paranoia. We are in a world that's surrounded by these things. You should instruct your children correctly, and you should avoid things to whatever degree you feel that you need to do that. It's hard for me to make policy. I mean, this is where, when the Harry Potter books first came out, the Christian world went berserk. Okay? And so, I grew up reading all of these kinds of things. I mean, I don't read very much, but whatever little bit of reading I did, I remember reading mythologies when I was in elementary school, and I thought it was interesting to read about Hercules or whoever, in the mythology books. But I never had any thought that that was real. I just found it, And so, sure, there are people that will be susceptible to go in a different direction, but just because they've watched a movie or read a book, I don't think in itself does anything. We watch a lot of movies about all kinds of things, and it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to go out and do that stuff. Okay, because if you have a problem with all the magic and all that stuff that's in the movies, what are you doing, all you ladies who watch all those Hallmark movies? And in every one of them, they're cheating on their fiancés, or they're having sex before marriage, so why are you doing all that? It's all the same is what I'm trying to say. So you probably can't read any book or watch any movie because they're doing stuff that shouldn't be done and that could influence your mind. Okay, now we just eliminated all entertainment. So there has to be some sort of balance in how we handle those things. And let's not be hypocritical and point the finger just at one piece of it. And this piece could be the magic part. Anybody could be pointing the finger at any piece of it. Often they do that. Well, the language in all of those songs and the rap songs and all the language. All the language. Have I told you all the stuff I heard growing up just in college and the way everybody talked? I don't think anybody can complete a sentence without a bomb in it. Some sort of expletive here, and that's just the way they talked. Your children all hear that. All the YouTubers sound like that. And they're all watching these YouTubers, and they're all talking that way. So it's not about isolating and taking all that out, but how do you help them put it in a proper framing, a proper context? Does that make sense? Okay? Because otherwise, it's like, look, I don't want you to take them out of the world. I just want them to be of the world. This is the world we live in. Now, I think it's a much different thing if we start participating in places where you're trying to put spells on people, like some cultures actually do, with the voodoo and the other stuff where they're actually trying to curse you. That's a whole different level than just reading books or watching movies where it's all like laughing and you think it's all stupid and funny and whatever. Because I don't think, how many of you have watched and read all those kind of stuff? Everybody, right? Okay. At any point, did you actually think about becoming a witch or a warlock or nobody, right? It doesn't really necessarily connect that way. So if it does connect that way for anybody, it's because there's probably something else going on and not the book or the movie. And so let's be aware of that so that we just, are not, we had people in our congregation years ago who, when they came over your house, boy, they were going to see what was in your house, what kind of movies were in your bookshelf, and boy, they were going to judge every single thing as being demons under every page, under everything, in every movie, in every book. They were. And they were going to attack you. I grew up as a kid who collected comic books. I knew one day they could make a movie that actually looked like what was in the comic book. They could do that now. They could actually see the heroes in the comic book on the screen doing the kinds of things because of technology that was in the comic book. And I remember as a kid thinking, one day maybe they could do that. But I also knew that if I went to go watch, Thor or the Avengers or something, people would be like, oh, I can't believe the rabbi did that. You bet I did. And enjoyed it very much. That's now going to go viral, along with the earlier moment. Okay? Okay? So I think it's something to be aware of. I think it's something that you cannot stop because it's everywhere, and your children are going to... I had a family member, and I also had people that I know that would try to keep their children away from Barbies and Disney and all that kind of stuff. But guess what? As soon as they go and have friends and they go and have a play date, they're getting exposed to all of it. You can't stop it, but you can monitor it to see how it's affecting them. Okay? Some of you don't want your children watching certain YouTubers and this stuff, and it's because of whatever. Then they go and hang out with their friends, and then, what do you think they're doing? Hey, check this out. And they're like, oh, cool. Well, you cannot control it in terms of stopping it, but you can control it in terms of talking to them about it and how it might or might not influence them. So is that an answer that works for you? Okay. And so let's live in the reality. Remember, this is a very red answer. Okay? Reds are pragmatic. And they will look at what's the best possible result can we get. And in this case, you cannot stop this. You cannot stop your children from interacting with and seeing and being exposed to these things. You just can't. Okay, so let's deal with that as a reality and a fact. So then what else choice do we have? Let's help them to understand how to make the right decisions with these things and what they need to avoid and not becoming caught up into a certain culture or mindset or thing that could lead them into a problem. Work with them on that level. And then they can make maybe better choices. Okay? Okay, who's next? Okay, David. 42382. Okay.
In chapter 17, verse 18, in terms of writing a copy, is there anything we can do as MTOI on maybe a yearly basis regarding this activity?
He's just trying to throw the little setup ball up there. That's like the softball. Okay, I'm ready. Just lay it up there. Okay, he's being kind of a wise guy, but he's being straightforward. We have had a challenge called, sort of the Torah challenge to write the scriptures, and I think we should do that every year. Not that we should write it every year, but just encourage people to at least at some point do what the kings were to do. If we're going to be a kingdom of priests and be in some sort of a royalty, a royal priesthood, that kind of thing, why wouldn't it make sense then for you to write yourself a copy of the Torah? And so how many of you have done that already? We've done the challenge for a little while. Okay, a few hands. Maybe I need to make some certificates for that. Okay? And so I would encourage you, as we leave Sukkot, the Torah cycle starts again. So I would encourage you that one of the best ways to go through the entire Genesis of Deuteronomy and write it out is write out each week's Torah portion. That way you're not like overwhelmed and intimidated with, I have to write out 5 books of stuff within a year. Well, if you do the Torah portions, guess what? In a year, you've written the whole thing. And each time, it's only a couple of chapters. And you have a whole week to get that done, on a weekly basis. Not like you have to do it all in a day. Every day you can write a little bit, knowing that you're covering 3 chapters, 4 chapters, or whatever it is. So I would encourage all of you to do that. Okay? Now, I'm planning to do that, but I'm going to be doing it a little different because I've also been planning to write my own annotated translation, etc. And so I'm going to try to start with Genesis 1 when we get back, if I can get the time and work it all out. But I won't get it all done in 1 year, but at least I can start writing my copy, but with notes, translation changes, all the adjustments that, the stuff that you hear me doing on a regular basis that I don't actually have a copy of anything that actually says. The better translation of tamim to integrity, those kind of things, right? So hopefully keep in prayer that I'll be able to do that and start coming to an MTOI translation with footnotes and whatever it needs to have. Okay, would that be something you'd be interested in? Okay. There's an incredible irony in this, which is that the one thing I hate more than anything else is writing. So if I actually wrote a translation, that would just be like, So don't hold your breath. It may never happen. I'm going to try to get it started. Now, I do actually have parts of it actually started from a couple of years back, so I'll have to go and look and see what I already did. I probably have a complete different understanding than when I wrote that many years ago anyway. It's probably about 10 years ago. So, Okay, who's next? We have a few, hold on. We have just about time for one more question.
Yeah, sorry. I know there's some more questions in here, but we only had one from the live stream, and that was from Dolores Stone. Could Deuteronomy 16:18 be used today with many fellowships? And that reads, appointed judges and officers within all our gates, which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you according to your tribes, and they shall judge the people with righteous right ruling.
Okay, so that's a real good question. And my answer is, look, there should be some sort of a structure in a congregational setting. In this case, you have Beth Shalom as a congregation, but it's a part of MTOI, the bigger organization. And MTOI does have a council of leadership that, for example, we're going to take this question about cross-contamination in restaurants and stuff, too, to come up with a policy or decision on. And if something were to come up that needed to have a judgment between brother and brother, sister and sister, whatever it had to be in that terms of thing, we do have leadership that can be brought into that and make some sort of a right ruling. But the point that's really complicated in terms of understanding is the appoint. It really needs to be the anointed appointeds that you have that help with the appointing. You can't just choose people you like and things that people you think will take your side and all those kind of things. We don't vote them in like a board every so many years, and then there's a rotation of that. We have to really be able to have a way to appoint those that are qualified. And that's really the hard part, because there's appoint judges and officers who are going to do what? They're going to judge the people with righteous right ruling. They better know their Torah. They have to know halakha, because they're going to have to make righteous right rulings. And so this is going to be the complicated part. So part of this is simply problematic due to volume. Okay, and by volume I mean how many people. See, Moses had how many, let's see if anybody remembers. How many men did he have over 20? 600 how many? No, not 625. 603, 550, okay? That's a lot of people. Or 608, 550. It was 603, 608, 550. 600,000 men. Do you think it was tough to find a few good ones that were respected, etc.? Now, bear in mind that the percentage, okay, the percentage, how many did he pick to start doing the heads of that? How many were the anointed elders when there was the anointing on him went off? 70, right? 70, 72, whichever way you want to. 70 elders. Do you know what percentage that is? Well, let me tell you, it's 0.00011. So make that a percent. That's not a tenth of a percent. I mean, that's not 10%. It's not 1%. It's not a tenth of a percent or a hundredth of a percent. I mean, it's a very small number. Now take that number and apply that percentage to a group of 300 like we have here. We probably don't even have enough people to find one, percentage-wise. When you consider 70 out of 603,000, that's incredible. Okay? So bear that in mind when we talk about this section here in Deuteronomy, the complication or the lack of simplicity of just appointing righteous right judges. We do have people that are, you can see, coming up into those areas. And we have, of course, you have me, you have Rabbi Tom, you have Robert, who's kind of coming into those places where you guys counsel with him and stuff. And we've got other leadership that we have within the organization that are not necessarily here right now, but that are there. We have people like David, I think, is doing a great job, who's really coming up into his own. Okay? And he thought he was just going to come to his first Sukkot. And I put all this burden on him, and he was not expecting. But it's, you know why that's happened, though? Because he volunteered a couple of months back to do a Torah portion on Tuesday night. And then he volunteered to do another one. And he started really to, he's come. Listen, if you remember the first one he did, very stiff, very nervous, right? Afraid to mess it up. And now he's getting more comfortable. He knows he simply goes 4, 2, 3, 8, 2, 5. Not a problem. Okay? But just realize when whoever asked the question online that this isn't so simple. I would love us to have these things in place, but it's a numbers game. There's only going to be so many per so many that actually are qualified to do these things. And so I did the math, and it was funny because I pulled my calculator up on my phone. It was still there from the last time I did it. That's why I was like thinking, I don't even have to divide that out again because it was still on my phone. I mean, that's a really small number. 0.00011, 5, 8, 9, 8, keep going, whatever, but 0.0001? 70 out of 603,000. What are the odds out of 300 we even have one or two? I think we have at least one or two, and that's amazing in such a small group. But then some of you go to home fellowships and know your friends who go to home fellowships, and there's 15 people in the room, and you think, what are the odds of one of them actually being anointed and appointed? It's a numbers thing. And so realize that that's what we're dealing with. So hopefully that answered the question. Anybody else? Because we got to really shut it down. Okay, good. Where's the mic? Yes. Okay, we're going to have the mic brought over to Dan, so Dan Craig, you can go ahead and close us in prayer. So nobody's going to be sort of taken by surprise when they're holding a mic and ask them to pray. I've gotten a few of you a couple of times. I go, where's the mic? Right here? Okay, good, you pray. Okay, so why don't we all stand up? We'll let Dan close us in prayer.
Abba, we praise you for this Midrash we heard this day. We thank you for the readers. We thank you for Marty and Robert and the team for all the technical support. We thank you for Dave and his help in facilitating. We thank you for my rabbi and his instruction. And I hope that going forward from this time and day by day, that I will, in all those hearing, will seek to guard these commands and these instructions that we have heard. Amen.
Amen. If you wish to enter into life, guard the commands. Guard the commands. All right, lunch is being served.